not, well, at least I was surprised by it. Saudi Arabia making a commitment of $7 billion to renewables. I think that says something very loud. And Toyota really making an investment in a lithium-ion company. So, yeah. Those are some announcements from Shell. So Shell is investing in renewable energy companies, utility companies, EV charging companies, and the announcement here, investing in an Indian mini-grid developer. So this mini-grid developer is Husk Power. It's a biomass company. Some of the other headlines that I did not include here was BP scanning for renewable deals. Total is making clean energy investments. So in a sense, big oil companies are, you could interpret it as they're getting ready for a future which is dominated by clean energy. The companies that, one of the companies that Shell acquired was New Motion, which is Europe's largest EV service provider. Ford just announced that it'll be making a massive investment in hybrid and all-electric models by 2020. India is trying to go electric in its own way. So India floated a tender which it claims was the world's largest to procure 10,000 electric vehicles. It's under a demand aggregation model. It's a government-owned company which floated the tender, and basically it will own the vehicles and lease them to certain government-owned companies to replace their normal fleet of diesel-powered or petrol-powered vehicles. Sounds simple enough, but then they discovered that they needed to set up some charging stations at the offices of these companies, and it was discovered that it's not easy to set up a charging station because that would involve a third party, and it would involve resale of electricity, which is not really permitted. So you need to look at changing laws and sorting it out. So some of these things seem simple to begin with, and you run into regulatory hassles. I want to leave you with a message for Nepal. There are a bunch of countries around the world that are committed to RE100. It's a campaign that these companies sign on saying that they will be 100% powered by renewable energy. I think they have 120 companies that have signed on there. They have companies from all over the world. And I think for countries like Nepal, I see no reason why countries cannot commit to, well, be 100% powered by clean energy. I think Nepal is very well endowed with hydro resources and with a layer of renewables. I mean, large hydro is technically not considered renewable, but there are some countries that do categorize it as renewable energy. Norway does it. India is planning to categorize large hydro as renewable. So the thought that I want to leave you with is that countries like Nepal can take the lead in some of these initiatives taking place around the world, maybe come up with its own campaign, and maybe not go down the path that requires replacement a few years down the line. And all of this can be done in a sustainable, economically viable manner. That's it from my end. A disclaimer, and it's the last slide. Again, my name is Vandana. I am available through the day here today, and I had a good time here yesterday. So if anyone wants to talk to me, I'm more than happy to have an offline conversation. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Gomber. Now, I would like to call upon stage Mr. Brand Singh, founding partner, Fresh VD and lead investor, atmospheric water generation, the next resource revelation. I would call upon stage Mr. Bragg. No? Okay. Okay, he's not here. So, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to start the session. Welcome you all once again. We will now proceed to the technical session. We all know that Nepal is very rich in water resources. Around 43,000 megawatt hydroelectricity is technically viable. Hence, our first session is on how Nepal can produce 14,000 megawatt in 10 years. What are the issues and challenges to achieve its full potential? Now, the presentation is by Mr. Nishant Kumar on enable long-term energy finance in local currency. The Mr. Kumar is Executive Director Asia at Garrett CEO Singapore office, where he is responsible for the execution of transactions in South Asia with on a focus on Nepal and Bangladesh. And in ASEAN, Pearl and the Guarantee Co. Mr. Kumar work across function in M&A, corporate finance, investment banking, and in renewable energy private equity, where he held organization and execution and infrastructure. The natural resources, agriculture, and F&B, and consumer transaction and investment across Asia Pacific. Kumar has MBA from University of Hong Kong and London Business School program and Bachelor of Technology in Mining Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, BHU, Varanasi, India. Okay, welcome, sir. The floor is yours. Nishant Kumar, Mr. Nishant Kumar.
I didn't expect to come so soon, so caught slightly off guard. And I haven't had my morning coffee yet, so pardon me for anything gibberish that I talk. So anyways, good morning, everyone, respected dignitaries and dear friends. I'm absolutely privileged and honored to be here. And let me also commend the organizers, especially Sujit, for a job really well done. Sujit, thanks for inviting me for this conference. Look, when the first time when I spoke with Sujit, one of the many things that he and I discussed, he asked me like, Nishant, can you send me a better picture of yours for the website? I told, look, I mean, this is not the first time this kind of request has come through, I mean, in past organizers have made a similar request. And unfortunately, my picture is what I am, I mean, if I need to do anything, I need to go and sue my parents for that, right? I mean, but anyways, so let me go now into the more serious stuff, as I say. So look, who are we? I mean, we are Garantco, and we are basically a DFI, or a developmental finance institution, promoted by or backed by 5 governments: government of the UK through DFID, government of Sweden, Switzerland, Netherlands through FMO, and government of Australia through DFAT. So we are basically a market-driven solution provider aimed at enhancing, local currency financing on long-term basis for infrastructure projects. We are A1 or AA- internationally rated. To date, we have underwritten almost $700 million worth of guarantees across 46 transactions in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Now, since we act as catalyst for channeling private sector investment or lending in projects, through our participation, we have channeled almost $4 billion of investments across projects in the regions where we operate in. Now, what we have achieved to date, look, I mean, there's too much of text on the slide, but I'll keep it short. We were set up in 2006, and it took us almost 5 years to go up to $100 million in guarantee. And then another 3 years to go up to $200 million. And then from 200 to 300, we actually achieved that landmark in about a year. And then from, I mean, we are now roughly $500 million or more than that, and we are growing by the day. Look, 2016, 17, and 18 has been landmark years for us in many ways. 16, the Australian government backed Garantco. We opened our first office in Asia in Singapore. And in 17, we also signed a partnership agreement with London Stock Exchange to help list local currency infrastructure bonds from markets across Africa and Asia. And 2018, in fact, it was only last week that we closed a transaction whereby we backed a renewables company out of Singapore, which issued a green bond in local currency out of Singapore. So, I mean, this is briefly about London LSE partnership. I won't go too much into detail. Look, I mean, the partnership was inked on 31st of March 2017. And as I said, it is LSE wants to become the flag bearer for local currency bond listings, and it sees Garantco as an able partner to do so for infra bonds from Africa and Asia. Now, look, why should one partner with Garantco, right? I mean, there are various value propositions for number of participants, I mean, across a project financing spectrum. So for financiers, Garantco acts as risk transfer rather than risk mitigant. I mean, and some of you would appreciate that a risk transfer mechanism is much better than a risk mitigation mechanism. It results in efficient capital treatment for long-dated transactions, and more importantly, it builds capacity in sustainable long-term financing in local currency amongst the local financing institutions. For the borrowers or the issuer, it acts as positive signaling, and sometimes we tend to underestimate this thing. Because, I mean, I'm working on a transaction in India whereby just because of our association with that particular transaction, other DFIs have decided to join in, and also other financial institutions have decided to come in. And I mean, not only for debt raising, I mean, also for borrowers or issuers, it also acts as positive signaling for equity investment. And then it helps the borrowers or issuers to access new pools of capital. I mean, if it's bond international capital market transaction, it would help them to attract, the long-term patient capital from infra funds or pension funds or insurance funds. Now, for suppliers or EPC contractors, it offers more flexible terms, an opportunity. It gives them an opportunity to mobilize projects while capital is being finalized. Now, I mean, this is an interesting slide, I mean, a lot of times I get asked this question. I mean, what is Garantco? I mean, what exactly are we? Are we an insurance company? Are we an ECA? I mean, who are we basically? We are neither ECA nor insurance company. We are a credit guarantee provider on financial and commercial terms. So we are not an aid provider. We would only participate in commercially and financially sustainable projects. That doesn't mean that we need to make outrageous rate of return like a Wall Street bank, but yes, we need to be financially and commercially sustainable. And we are not here to replace an ECA or insurance company. Private insurance market. It would be really foolish to make that statement. We are there as an important cog in the wheel in the capital structure for a borrower or the issuer. We would help transfer a lot of risk. We would enable local currency financing, which is equally important. As much as a dollar financing is important in some cases, our association is equally important for channeling local currency financing. And I'll talk about benefits of local currency financing in a later slide. Now we can go as long as up to 15, 16 years in tenor, and we would guarantee up to 50% or $50 million, whichever is lower. Now, brief about our investment policy. Look, 10 to $50 million, that's the ideal ticket size. Now, important thing is to note guarantee types. Our guarantee is really premium in a way that we are, it's an unconditional, irrevocable payment on demand. So if there is a default, no questions asked and we pay. And that's how we work. It's not like, again, clause 6.2.1 in an insurance contract, after 180 days, your payment can still be delayed. Then we cover both principal and interest. And in terms of beneficiaries, it would be the banks or the bond investors if it's a bond transaction. Now, I want to get down to environmental and social standards. It is really very, very important for us. Our standards are called PITCH, or Private Infrastructure Development Group standards, of which we are part of. And these standards are as stringent, if not more, than IFC performance standards. And now this is really very important slide for local, to illustrate the importance of local currency financing. Look, Nepal is a priority country for Guaranto, and we, as an institution, we aim to build sustainable financing capacity in Nepalese financing market by partnering with various solution providers and institutions here, and introduce new project risk evaluation and financing mechanism. Look, local currency financing has its own benefits, and this is actually, at least a part of capital we believe should be in local currency financing, because it helps match your at times your revenue or your OPEX, the items which are there in local currency. Now, I'll skip this slide. So I'll quickly run into some of the case studies or selected case studies. This was our first project in Nepal. We as an institution, we were the only ones who provided a guarantee for 280 crores, or roughly $28 million in Nepalese rupee, to a group of 5 Nepalese banks in Lower Solu hydro project, where we helped provide guarantee for almost 16 years in local currency. Now, this is an interesting case study as well, which we want to replicate across Asia. Very briefly, we set up in Nigeria, we set up a local guarantee institution called InfraCredit. Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund was flush with cash, but they always invested in, or have been investing in, government securities. And when we asked them, why don't you act as a key participant in infrastructure projects, financing of infrastructure projects? And they made an interesting comment, which was like, I mean, if we make a return, then nobody gives a pat at our back, but if we lose money, then we are crucified. So why not just play safe and invest in govies? Now, we told them, why don't we make investing in infrastructure as safe as investing in govies? And hence, InfraCredit was born. So, Garantco put in, Garantco and Nigerian Sovereign Wealth Fund both put in equal amount of capital. We got other DFIs as well, and through our association, we got it rated AAA. I mean, the institution has levered up by 5 times to have a total guarantee capability of roughly $1 billion, and we are very proud to say that InfraCredit Nigeria has guaranteed its first bond, Naira bond in Nigeria. And this one is another case study from Pakistan, where we helped guarantee the first sukuk in Pakistan. So that brings to end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, coffee is right outside the hall, so you can go and grab your coffee. And you can just don't leave the hall. You can just grab your coffee and come back. It's like 5-10 minutes break. So we'll see you right back. Thank you. Dr. Thapa is the Assistant Professor of Mechanical Engineering Department. At Kathmandu University, he is the faculty in charge and member secretary at the Turbine Testing Lab of the university. He has published extensive in renewable energy issues of Nepal. He has a PhD from Department of Energy and Process Engineering, Norway University of Science and Technology, Norway, and Masters from Master of Science and Renewable Engineering in Energy Engineering. Mr. Biraj Thapa. Mr. Biraj Thapa, I would like to request you to come on stage and give the presentation. Biraj Thapa, Mr. Biraj Thapa. Mr. Biraj Thapa, we are waiting for you. Sir? Okay. Okay, sir. I would like to request you to come on stage and give your presentation. Okay, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. I would like to express my thanks to EDC and inviting me in this summit. I represent Kathmandu University. So my name is Biraj Singh Thapa. I work at Department of Mechanical Engineering at Kathmandu University. So my workstation is a turbine testing lab where we deal with research and development of hydraulic machines. So today I will be presenting what we have done so far and how it can be related towards business development in Nepal. I know that the schedule has been a bit changed, so I expect some more audience to be coming in. So, but I'll start slowly. So, briefly talking about the hydropower potential, maybe these are not the very new slides. We have been talking about it quite often. If you look, Asia is the biggest hydropower market. More than 50% of hydropower developed so far lies in Asia. But the future is even more glorious in Asia. It's like more than 62% of planned hydropower projects are being focused towards Asia. So it's no doubt, when you talk about hydropower plants, Asia is the biggest market. But when we look towards the history of hydropower in Asia, hydropower started in 1897 when a small 65 into 2 kilowatts hydropower plant was built in India. It was in Darjeeling. But Nepal followed it quite fast, and in 2011, the first hydropower plant in Nepal and the second hydropower plant in Asia was built, and similarly, China followed Nepal, and in 1912, the third hydropower plant in Asia was built. So when we look in the history, so Nepal, India, and China were the pioneers of hydropower developers in Asia, but the story has changed. So coming to 2017, India has developed more than 61% of its hydropower, and China has developed more than its 41% of hydropower, 331 gigawatts in China. And when we look in Nepal, it's less than 1 gigawatt. But the prospects is quite high. So what we see in our summit's target as well, 40,000 megawatt in 10 years. That's where we lie. So potential is huge in Nepal. It's not what we did not do in past. It's all about what we can do in future. So if you look on the projects that has been under construction or that has been in the pipeline of some stages of development in Nepal, we can see almost 25,000 megawatts are in some stages of development, at least. So in future, it can grow. It's not only in Nepal. If you put Nepal in the center, and if you look around South Asian markets, it's almost 200,000 megawatts of hydropower are in some stages of planning. So Nepal, Southeast Asia, and overall Asia has a big prospects of hydropower. These are the opportunities. But if you look South Asia as a market, and if you see Himalayan basins, and particularly Nepal as a potential future prospects, we have not only opportunities but also challenges. And these challenges are quite unique to the Himalayan basins, and these are brought by the sediments. We belong to the new soil formations, so our soils are weak, and they are carried to the rivers in the monsoon period. So if you see the sediments contents in Nepalese rivers, so more than 50% of sand that we catch are quartz, and these are hard particles, and they damage turbines. They are harder than the turbine-based materials, and if you can see on the next pictures, some of the damages that are done by the sand. It's quite unique. It's not present everywhere. It's not present around the globe. It's very, very unique under the Himalayan basins and also in the Andes basins. Very small portion of the market, but very significant, and the problems are very challenging. So it's not only the opportunities that lies in the Himalayas and in South Asian belts, but also the challenges brought by the sediments. And if you look back, why these are so problematic? So if you see some fundamental things, I don't want to go into technical details, but if you look, for example, a Francis turbine that carry more than 60% of the global hydropower market. So these are designed in such a way that the water coming inside the turbines accelerates quite fast. The water is starting at 10 meter or 15 meter per second at spiral casing, and goes and rises up to 65 meters around guide vanes, and also around 40 meters around the runner outlets. These are very efficient turbines. These are designed to operate under these extreme high velocity conditions, and these are designs with more than 150 years of experiences. So these turbines have passed the time testing and research and development for 150 years still, and they are very efficient, but they are designed for clean waters. They are not designed for the sediment-laden projects. And if you see the future markets, it lies in Asia. And if you look on those future markets, the sediment deposition is quite high. So all the projects in Asia, or almost the projects in Asia, which are to be developed in future, they have sediments. More than 50% of global sediments, it comes from Asian rivers. And from studies, it has shown that the sediment erosion of turbines is related with the velocities of the flow. So if we look at this turbine, for example, I don't want to go in details, but if you see, we can see that the highest velocities lies here. It's around 50% of head, that can be around 65 meters. And if you see the problems, this is the India's largest power plant. 1500 megawatts power plant in India, designed very nicely from the Norwegian companies. They fail because they are not designed for high sediment laden projects. If you see, the next high velocities lies at Runner Outlet, and this is the biggest power plant in Nepal, 144 megawatt Kali Gandaki power plants. More than 30% of the turbine material has been removed. Again, these are the best designs. This can produce 96% efficiency, but the water should be clean. So if you look around the South Asian regions, these problems are there. And it's not only about the turbine operations. We have also measured in one of the power plants, in around 45 days, we have measured the loss of efficiency by 4%. And when we talk about 40,000 megawatts, loss of efficiency of 4% in 15 days, that's trillions of dollars. Here we address, here we want to come and intervene, and we want to say, yes, we have a very good design, but these designs are not for Nepal. We have to do something. And in addition with the losses in efficiencies, so losses for repair and maintenance cost and downtime cost, they add up, and the numbers becomes heavier. So before we go on scaling up to 40,000 megawatts, we have to go back and address on these challenges in some ways. And if you look on the turbine manufacturing experiences of Nepal, so Nepal not only has the problem of operation, we also lack the turbine manufacturing experiences. We started in 1962 with 5 kilowatt, and coming to 2016 or 17, we have only capacity of manufacturing 100 kilowatts. So with 100 kilowatt turbine manufacturing capacity, we are trying to develop 40,000 megawatt. Of course, we can buy it, that's okay. But still, we have to think how, if there is possibility to manufacture turbines in Nepal, that can be handled for the Nepalese projects, particularly handling the sediment projects. In past, we have been able to export some turbines. For example, 100 kilowatt turbines to Bhutan and Malaysia, even Cambodia, India, even some part of Tibet. But now, even the exports has been quite slowed down. So if you look towards the Nepalese context, if you look towards the operation and maintenance, we have problems of erosion. If you look towards the turbine manufacturing, we don't have capacity, we don't have exports and knowledge to develop turbines by ourselves. So that's the reality. And from the academic prospects, we take up that reality also to be part of our challenges. So turbine testing lab, where I work, we try to address these problems. So this is a very unique lab in the world. So with the geological, topological variety, we have 30 meters of head that can be used as the open head. And nowhere in the world has 30-meter open head in the laboratory scale. We have 300 kilowatts of direct testing capacity. And we can test all the models of whatever size. This is a common testing lab between Kathmandu University and Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Norway. NORAD has given us 60% of grants, and most particularly 20% of the grants that's coming for building this lab is coming from the local hydropower institute. So we cooperate with a lot of IPPs and the hydropower developers to solve the problems of the hydropower projects. So we look towards the testing of hydraulic machines. We work towards developing new turbines, particularly for sediment handling. Education and training is part of our daily work, being university. And we also work together with IPPs and hydropower developers for this work to solve the hydropower industry's technical challenges. So looking back, so the first aim we want to look in is we want to promote the turbine research and development. We want to look the possibilities of design and manufacture of turbines for sediment handling issues. And we started with small case studies, and we succeed. We did all the design, manufacturing, testing of small scale turbines, and we achieved a goal. So we together with NTNU Norway, we started a Francis turbine development project where we built all the hydraulic design and optimization algorithms and testing process. We developed the CAD models, we developed the manufacturing drawings, and we did all the manufacturing in Nepal. So this was the first Francis turbine. It's the model of 4 megawatt Francis turbine in Jimruk, but still this was the first Francis turbine designed and manufactured in Nepal. And this was designed for handling high sediments. And our testing shows that yes, it can. And the success lies when these turbines not standing in the lab, but we want to see these turbines operating in Nepalese power plants and showing the better results with less erosion due to sediments. That is our goal, and that is where we are striving for. So we have several academic activities, several PhD students, several master students has contributed for development of this kind of design technologies. Of course, we not only work on Francis, we also work on different projects. So we have done several tests and certifications. We have small scale of 5 kilowatt cross flow, medium scale of 20 kilowatt cross flow, and then 92 kilowatt Francis turbines. So future. So that's the main thing. So if in future we want to see this lab as a research center, as a center of excellence, where we want to conduct model testings, where we want to do the work for design and manufacturing, and also the services for hydropower industry. We have vision. We want to work together with the several manufacturing companies, and we want to bring our knowledge for development of turbines in Nepal. So we have done some work, how to bring this idea into business. We started in 2010, and there has been several works. But we realized being a university in leading position will not help. We need industry to develop. We need industry to come in front and work together with university and bring the ideas and innovations that we have in our university into business. So that's how we think Nepal needs a breakthrough. We need some industry that should be able to cooperate with industry and with university. So this is just a model. We have proposed some models. So I have been shown the time limitation. So we want to create a partner. We expect some company to come up and then to deal with the project developer, to deal with the government agency and all. But from the university side, we can share our designs. We can do the designs. We can create the manufacturing drawings, and we can support on the other technical aspects. But we want to see some industry coming up and taking this role and making a company in Nepal. Yes, this is possible. We have done a lot of work to make this feasible. So we see the company can operate. So there are so many things that can be done. Design, manufacturing, trading, installation, commission, and after sales. Everything is being done in Nepal. But what is not that has been done is the line of red, the design of the turbines. That is the component design, turbine detail design, turbine production drawings. And these are something that has not been done in Nepal so far. And here from the university side, we have done it. We have some knowledge. We can share. And we are discussing with the companies to take up these roles where we can fill up the gap. So yes, there are some ideas. This has been proposed. We have been working together with other departments, and we can show that if we start the company, we can start from the pilot project phase, incubating phase, progressing phase. We have done a lot of work. And we have also suggested the company can be called Quartz Hydros. And we're open to some discussions. We have been talking with several components to join together, and we have been inviting to discuss and take this idea from what we have done so far. So we are looking forward to a pilot project, and this is a very small project, and then we want to bring this idea, the turbine that has been designed by Kathmandu University, to be running in some pilot projects. We are very close to sign an agreement where we start to acquire the design and manufacture turbines, install there. Yes, this is the last slide. So there are some challenges. There are so many challenges, but the red ones are ones that we identify are the major ones. So we want to form the project consortium and the company. That's the first challenge. It's very hard to, it's very easy to incubate new ideas, but to make a team and to make the idea feasible and implementable is challenge, particularly in Nepal. So that's the major challenge. So I coming from the university, what's the role? That's the thematical, that's the philosophical question that we always face. Can university promote business? Can university enter into the business? Can a professor like me do business? And we say, if we don't, then business will not happen. That's our argument. So we don't know how the hydropower market will respond. The IPPs, the developers, the suppliers, the other manufacturing companies, how will they react to the ideas that we have been pitching off? And the guarantee issues and so many other issues are there. But still, this is a dream. And I think if we dream it correctly, it can be seed for success. And I coming from the university, I want to pitch this idea to the developers. And it's industry that has to take the idea and bring into business. From the university, we are always on the backside. We are always ready to push the industry and support with what we know and what we can do for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now we have panel discussion of accelerating hydropower development. Key challenges. To moderate this discussion, we have Mr. Anil Chitrakar. The Chitrakar is trained as an engineer and energy planner. He started his career as an energy engineer of the Academy of Science and Technology, when he traveled to remote areas of Nepal to transfer renewable energy technology. In 1993, he was one of the 100 global leaders for tomorrow awardees at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Recently, he has also Brandon. Sorry, I think we should go for the next thing. Now I would like to request Mr. Brand Singh, founding partner, press VD and leader investor of FND, and atmospheric water generation and the next resource revolution.
Hello? Awesome. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And today, I'm here to talk to you all about a technology known as atmospheric water generation, creating high-quality drinking water from the air around us. This will fundamentally change how the world works and kickstart the next resource revolution, the water revolution. My name is Brian Shang, and I'm the founder of Fresh VC, a venture capital firm based in the US, and I'm the lead investor in FND, the world's leading technology company in atmospheric water generation. The water crisis, the global water crisis, is one of the most pressing problems facing humanity today. Put simply, we're running out of water. Humans are using up more water faster than the Earth is able to refill itself, and as a result, this is what we're seeing all over the world. And this isn't a problem of the next generation, as you all know. This is a problem of this generation. And this is what the world will look like in just 20 years. Advanced nations and developing nations alike will face extreme water shortage. And at the same time, what little water we have left is getting rapidly polluted by industrial activities, agricultural runoff, sewage, and water is being polluted by harmful chemicals, parasites, and all sorts of pollution. According to the World Health Organization, 844 million people do not have access to clean drinking water, and 159 million people depend on surface water to survive. That is water like this, to drink, to cook, to live. And since we're not able to rapidly provide a new source of water, most effort go into turning dirty water into clean water. But that's a very big process because there's all kinds of pollution and each one requires a different solution. But what if we didn't need to do that? What if we're actually able to access a completely new source of water that has never been before been tapped? And we can, because there's so much water in the atmosphere around us. In fact, there's so much water in the air that at any given time, there's about 140 trillion tons of water available. And that number is rapidly and naturally replenished by the Earth's natural hydrological cycle when water is evaporated by sunlight. And we understand this, obviously, since rainwater comes from the atmosphere. But rainwater is uncontrollable, and rainwater is passive. Rainwater doesn't respond to our needs. So with atmospheric water generation, for the first time ever, we're able to control that. FND's atmospheric technology allows us to actively reach into the air and create clean, healthy water anywhere and everywhere. But there are some hurdles and misconceptions about how this might work. One of the common misconceptions is that places that need this technology the most are too dry for this to work. And that's actually just not true. Many places that are most lacking in ground and local water supplies are actually very abundant in atmospheric humidity. Here are some examples. Places like Mongolia, UAE, Saudi Arabia, South Africa are some of the driest places on Earth. And yet, they have very high atmospheric humidity. In fact, look at Cape Town, South Africa, a place that has essentially declared doomsday because they're out of water. And yet, annual average humidity is close to 80%. Imagine how the lives of people in these places would improve and change if they had an alternative water source, a new water source. And there are other problems. For far too long, we have depended on traditional and conventional sources of water, like lakes, rivers, and underground supplies as our only way to access water. And as a result, we're unable to rapidly respond to disasters. When pollution happens, what we should be able to do is rapidly respond and make sure this doesn't happen. And instead, polluted water reaches the taps and there are a lot of horrible effects on people who drink this kind of water. So we need to change that. We need to cut this dependency on traditional sources of water and think of an alternative. Since this is a power summit, we can make some energy analogies. For the longest time, we were dependent on power transmission lines to access electricity produced by burning traditional fossil fuels. And with the advancements in solar technology, we were able to reach up into the sky and harness the energy of the sun. And as a result, innovative companies like Tesla and the Powerwall were able to create decentralized renewable energy. And similarly, we have been dependent on water sources like dams, rivers, and lakes. And with advancements in atmospheric technology, we're able to reach up in the sky and harness the water in the atmosphere. And what Tesla is doing for the energy industry, FND is doing for the water industry. And without further ado, here is a video showing FND's flagship product, the Aquarius F20.
Water, the source of life. It takes on many forms, and when the conditions are right, it pours down from the clouds, surrounds us, making life beautiful, making life possible. This vital resource may seem abundant, but it's not limitless. Despite today's technology, our water footprint continues to grow. The average American family of 4 uses 400 gallons of water a day. We still rely on rain and snow to give us the water we need to live our lives. Wouldn't it be better if we could reach up and harvest it for ourselves? Introducing Aquarius, an atmospheric water generator that pulls moisture out of the most readily available resource, the air around us, and creates potable water. Everything you need is contained within the unit. Simply plug it in, turn it on, and it begins a 3-cycle process. First, ambient air is purified for particulate matter. Then it condenses water and collects it into the 9-liter tank. Finally, with a patented purification technology, the water is treated for chemicals, heavy metals, and other contaminants. Reverse osmosis and UV sterilization create water of the highest quality. Clean, pure, natural. The built-in water dispenser allows you to enjoy it instantly, hot or cold. And once at capacity, the machine uses UV light to disinfect water every other hour, so you can be assured to have high-quality water available throughout the day. In addition, the unit monitors air quality and humidity and reminds you when to change the filter. All of this information is accessible within the Aquarius app, which tracks your drinking data to inform you and even suggest better drinking habits. Whether in the home or office, you can count on fresh water being readily available, independent of precipitation or local water supply, tapping from a source that's plentiful, natural, and accessible wherever you are. At Aquarius, our mission is to become part of the solution to the growing water problem around the world, and we're doing it one family at a time. Our dependency on water will never change, but with Aquarius, fresh water can become the next sustainable resource when it's tapped from the sky. Aquarius. Transform your lifestyle and become part of the solution.
So sorry about that. Seems like we're having some video difficulties, but you can check out the F&D booth outside during the breaks and check out the machine and try some of the water. And so this technology is very well suited for Southeast Asia because Southeast Asia has very high humidity. And Southeast Asia is already using many different ways to address the water problem. But the current solutions have different hurdles of their own. Some of these problems include the long construction time of water solution projects, the fact that water solution projects still require an actual water source. And when we're talking about turning dirty water into clean water, most of the times it requires the use of chemicals. And putting all that aside, even when we're able to create clean water, it gets recontaminated before it reaches the end consumer. So for example, water diversion projects are a great way to provide a lot of water for a large population. But projects like these can take years, if not tens of years, to complete before people are able to draw water from it. And it's very expensive to build. And when you're turning dirty water into clean water, you're using chemicals such as chlorine and fluorine to disinfect and kill bacteria. While this solves one problem, it creates another set of problems. Chlorinated water is cancerous. According to a study, people who drink chlorinated water have a 93% higher chance of getting cancer than people who drink regular water. And so, even putting that aside, and we're able to get clean water, the water is delivered through existing piping infrastructure that look like this. I mean, this is disgusting. How can you drink water that is delivered like this? And people are not even aware of it. People think that they're drinking clean water, when in reality, it gets recontaminated. And this is why atmospheric water generation is such a great alternative and complement to existing solutions, because they're able to bypass the problems. By nature, water created from atmospheric humidity is cleaner and better than treated water. And as a result, we're able to create better water. And even when the air is polluted, air purification can easily remove the particulate matter in the air, and the water purification process used in atmospheric water generation do not use chemicals, so we don't have to worry about chlorine and fluorine. And the best thing about this is that the technology is scalable. So small products can create tens of liters up to hundreds of liters for smaller populations, but at the same time, this can scale up and create hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tons of water through F&D's atmospheric water factories. And when I say factories, I don't want people to think, heavy, large equipment that takes a long time to build. This technology is scalable and mobile and meant to be constructed in a short period of time, in months, so that it can be constructed in areas of high humidity and placed very close to the eventual consumer, so it bypasses the risk of secondary pollution through piping infrastructure. And as you can see, we can scale this up to whatever size we need. And this is not a vision of the far future. This is now. The company already has 200,000-ton facilities approved in China and talking with governments around the world to bring it to different countries. And people are very excited, and I'm also very excited. Because at Fresh VC, I'm committed to investing in disruptive technologies that have the potential to change the behavior and lives of millions of people. And I truly believe that this technology is an industry-defining technology that can change the world. But changing the world is a big mission, and we can't do it alone. We're looking for partners, investors, government organizations, and charities and NGOs to help us bring this solution to the millions of people who are in need. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I would like to thank Sujit for giving me the opportunity to share this innovative technology with all of you here today. And if this mission is exciting to you, if changing the future is exciting to you, please join me in making the future, the bright future, a reality today. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to call up on stage Mr. Kiran Jetwa, founder and managing partner, FUMASE, Asset Development of Renewable Energy. Okay, welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. The last speaker, you took the clicker. So what we are going to be talking is the favorite subject of everybody, and that's money, right? So, is the presentation loaded? So while we are doing this technical difficulty, how many people here are investors? Quick show of hand. A few. How many people are government officials defining policies? One. So that should be something that should change, because we need more policy people here. How many people are developers? The rest are all developers? All right. So anyway, FUMASE basically is focused on three main sectors: renewable energy, water and waste. Our geographic focus is Southeast Asia and South Asia. So I'm going to skip through some slides because basically the time is very limited. So we started off as an advisory company, defining policies, energy mix, tariff definition, and then quickly moved into project development. So we are developing multiple projects in Southeast Asia. Right now we are developing a 40 megawatt solar project in Malaysia. We are looking at around, this is only saying 30 megawatts, but probably around 100 to 150 megawatts in Philippines. India right now, based upon the tariff rate, we have decided that we are going to take a back seat because the tariff rates are too low. It doesn't make sense, and we'll go into why it doesn't make sense. Waste to energy is something of interest to us. And that, we'll talk more about it as to why it is an interesting market. On the way from the airport to the hotel, I passed a river, which was a little bit dry. There was some water, but the rest of the riverbed, people were using for dumping their waste. It was basically a landfill. Can you imagine the pollution that caused? Not only people surrounding that area, but also downstream. So we have a small development fund that we use for development activities. We also have a construction equity fund that is used to bring in equity investments into the project. At the end of the day, we do project finance, and I'll talk more about that as well. We are not a technology company, but we do have partners in all the different technology sectors. This seems like a different presentation. Anyway, I think you have picked up the wrong presentation. This is the Fumase presentation, not the... Yeah, this one. This is the one. So at the end of the day, we look at a very holistic approach to sustainable green cities. And so we focus on power and energy storage that goes hand in hand. We focus on waste, and we focused on water. If you think about it, at the end of the day, any city, any remote area, what does humanity need? Need power, need water, need shelter, and any waste that is generated, if you can recycle it somehow, right? Our future, we may go into transport sector as well, and that is something that we are looking into, but not basically to make investments into manufacturing of electric vehicles. What we are more interested in is the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure. I'm going to skip all these slides. At the end of the day, the gist of it is that demand for power is going to keep growing. If you look at India, it's growing at 4.4 CAGR, right? If you compare OECD versus non-OECD, non-OECD demand growth for power and GDP growth is going to oversurpass OECD. As demand for GDP grows, so does the demand for power. As population grows, so does the energy intensity, but still you can see it's going to drop quite a bit because of energy efficiencies. So what is a typical project investment process? What we do is, there was a presentation yesterday, as somebody mentioned, the bottom line. At the end of the day, it's the bottom line. And this is basically the bottom line. We look at all the different factors and compare the risks and against the returns and figure out what is the premium that is required. And I'll go into more details about this as well. At the same time, what we have created is what we call a triple bottom line framework. And there, we want to look at not just the bottom line. Of course, the bottom line, the financial return, is the primary driver. At the same time, we want to make sure that we also look at the social benefits and the environmental benefits. So every time we make any investments into any project, we are looking at what is the social score, what is the impact on the local economy, how many permanent jobs are created, what is the health impact. On the environment, we look at what is the greenhouse gas emissions. Does it follow the standards? Different countries have different standards, but what we do is a self-imposed standard, and that is we'll follow the European standards for emissions. And so the projects we invest in better follow those. Now, if you take that framework and compare thermal power plant versus a solar power plant versus a waste to energy. So this is thermal, this is solar, this is waste to energy. Then you can see that waste to energy scores much higher. Solar projects, we do invest in solar projects, right? It's not that we don't. But on a social score, it doesn't score very high. And the reason being that the project does not generate permanent jobs. The permanent jobs are created at the EPC level, not at the project level. So from that perspective, it doesn't score as well on a social side. But environmental side, obviously, it scores pretty high. So I'm going to skip this slide. Basically, it's a dichotomy for emerging markets like Nepal, whether you go for thermal power plants, or you go for renewable. But in Nepal, it's mostly hydro, so we don't have to worry about it. So at the end of the day, this is where I want to talk about. This is what the main presentation is all about, right? There are three main stakeholders: the developer, the government body who defines the policies, and the investors. And I'll go reverse. I'll talk about the investors' perspective first, then talk about the government policies, and then talk about the developers. So when an investor is entering an emerging market, all these different risks that come in, right? There is a lack of due diligence, there is a collateral. Typically what I have found is in emerging markets, the developers don't have very good collateral. They lack that professionalism. They lack the track record. The developers don't have credit. For example, in India, the banks still require collateral. There is no such thing as non-recourse financing. And that becomes challenging for projects. At the end of the day, real project finance is non-recourse financing. It's based upon the cash flows of the project. But the banks still are not quite in terms with that. We'll talk about the country macro risks. So what we do is we look at project finance. We do not do corporate finance. We only do project finance. We obviously look at the IRRs, interest rates, and all of that. We look at the business model innovation. We look at the track record of the developer, and more importantly, the EPC company that's also going to do not just the construction, but the O&M part as well. Quite a few developers these days, especially with solar, they don't have the track record. They don't have the collateral. And so that's where we want to bring in financing, not just the equity, but also the debt part, to make sure that the banks are comfortable with that. The earlier presentation from Grant, that was very interesting as to how do you mitigate that risk? How do you transfer that risk according to his terms, right? That was quite interesting. But at the end of the day, think about this. When you're talking about, we are looking at integrity versus intelligence versus zeal versus connections. When you are looking at a developer, and I'm going to ask you that question as to which one you think is the most important. And I'll give you the answer in a later slide. But keep this in mind. What do you think as a developer is important? So when it comes to a market, an emerging market, we look at the country risk. We look at the political risk. We look at the currency risk, the grid risk, the off-taker risk, and the natural calamity risk. In Nepal, there were this earthquake that destroyed quite a few of the projects, and it's important. So that becomes kind of a side impact that we need to look at as well. But each and every risk, there is a premium. That premium has to be accounted for. And the countries have to remember that countries are competing against each other to get that foreign direct investments, right? So, for example, right now in India, the tariff rates have dropped so low, it's 2 rupees, 3 rupees. For somebody like us, it doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, India is still an emerging market. There is still off-taker risk. There is still grid risk. There is still currency risk, right? Political stability, right now it looks a little good. Nepal is the same way. Political-wise, it looks pretty good. But at the end of the day, countries have to remember that there are all these risks. These are emerging market risks. You cannot say, okay, these risks don't exist, and so now let's drop the tariff rate so low, becomes becomes cheaper for the ultimate consumer. I'm sorry, but you have to basically look at all these risks. You cannot ignore them, right? So from a financing perspective, what are all the different options that developers have? Well, there is angel, friends and family, there is private equity, there is commercial banks, there is DFIs, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, yieldcos. Green tech financing is something that maybe government of Nepal can look into as well, where in Malaysia, the Ministry of Finance has created something called the Green Tech Financing Scheme. There, they basically provide a certain percentage of the debt. And what they do is basically the debt interest rate, it's a rebate program. So the bank gets their money, but the overall cost to the developer is reduced by 1.5 points. And it's an interesting, so something like this could be something that the government of Nepal could look at as well. I was very happy that the pension fund, EPF, is doing direct investments in Nepal, which is very good. I think the insurance companies should also get involved. And that's where basically the local companies like insurance companies, commercial banks, the pension funds, if they get involved, it creates liquidity in the local market, and that will basically drive the progress of energy projects. From a government perspective, so now switching to government, right? These are all the different challenges that they have. The policies are not quite there. People have been talking about FIT. FIT rates are quite high typically to spur the development of renewable energy projects, which is good, but that's not a sustainable model. Similarly, getting help from World Bank, IFC, that's also not a sustainable model. You can get that help from banks like that for a short time, but at the end of the day, countries have to stand on their own 2 feet. You have to make it sustainable, right? Net metering regime doesn't work in a very low tariff environment, because if you're thinking about, let's say, a residential solar project, for that person to put up solar on his or her roof will take a 20-year payback period, 15 to 20-year payback period. Doesn't work. So net metering right now, Malaysia, for example, is trying it and is failing miserably. Reverse auction does work, and there was a mention of solar park. I think that's a very interesting strategy that governments could take to spur growth into this area. Financing from local versus FDI is also very interesting, and any country that is looking for FDI, we already talked about all the different risks, and there needs to be a premium that has to be placed for all those different risks. The grid is another. I mean, there was a discussion yesterday about the Nepal grid being not very strong, and I think that is an important challenge. In India, they're putting up a green transmission line, as in a green corridor, where DFIs like KfW, Japanese banks are getting involved, and they are financing the grid. Once the grid is there, then all these other development projects can use that grid, right? But the grid needs to be strong. And given renewable energy, energy storage becomes also, utility scale energy storage becomes very important. Because RE by nature, solar and wind are intermittent. So is there something that can be done to make use of that resources and at the same time provide base load? So if we go back to my original slide about holistic approach, we are looking into projects. We are looking into projects where basically we combine solar with a base load generation like hydro or biomass or waste to energy and battery or energy, some form of energy storage to generate power that is 24/7 renewable power. I think I already talked about all the different things, so let's click on. So now from the government perspective, this is kind of interesting. Investors look at this kind of reports, all right? And if you look at Nepal, Nepal is in the alert section. So that's where I was hoping some government people would be here. They would look at this, because this is what investors look at, right? This is another thing. Nepal as a country does not have a sovereign rating. Okay, I mean, if I go back, Nigeria, which is in the high alert state, right? Right here. Even they have a rating, sovereign rating. Why does Nepal as a country does not have any rating? What happens? How does it work? Let me give you a little background. When private equity funds look at investing into a project in a country, the first thing they look at, it is what is the sovereign rating of that country. And that's like a checkbox. It has to be BBB and above. That is investment grade. Now, if the country does not even have a rating, that checkbox doesn't get ticked, the whole project is essentially eliminated, right? So that's where, if you are looking at foreign direct investments, Nepal as a country needs to get this. I mean, right now, this is what happens. When I did an S&P, same thing on Moody's. If I look for Nepal's rating, there's nothing there. I go to Fitch, nothing there. Now, as an individual, since I'm Indian origin, I understand Nepal. I understand the risk. But think about other European investors. They don't know Nepal. What they do when it comes to risk, sovereign risk, they go to these sites to figure out what is the country risk. And if there is no risk, no credit rating, Nepal is not getting any FDI. So if there are any government officials in the audience, if you need help, contact me. I can get you connected to the S&P or Moody's to get the government rating going. It's very important. From a developer, so most of the time, the risk is financing risk. And that, by far, is the highest risk. Land acquisition is always a problem. Any country you go, if you are into biomass, yes, feedstock would be a risk. All the soft cost. And I know what I'm sure you guys know what I mean by soft cost. So make sure that is controlled or zero if possible. So going back, as I was talking to you, what is the most important factor for somebody like Fumase? It's integrity. Yes, everybody can be intelligent. Yes, everybody can have very high zeal. Yes, they can claim to be having a lot of connections. But at the end of the day, there is no get-rich-quick schemes. You need to have integrity. You need to have transparencies. And you can, fool me once, blame on you. Fool me twice, blame on me, right? It goes without saying. So please remember, at the end of the day, the planet is not inherited from our parents, but it's borrowed from our children, our future children. So let's take care of the planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you like the presentation. I enjoy it. Now we have the panel discussion on accelerating hydropower development, the key challenges. To moderate this discussion, we have Mr. Anil Chitrakar. The Chitrakar is trained as an engineer and energy planner. He started his career as an energy engineer for the Academy of Science and Technology, when he traveled to remote areas of Nepal to transfer renewable energy technology. In 1993, he was one of the 100 global leaders for tomorrow awardees at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Recently, he has also been awarded the Tech Award in Silicon Valley for his work on renewable energy technology. Mr. Chitrakar is currently president of Siddhartha Inc., a private initiative dedicated to unlocking markets responsibly. He has bachelor's from the University of Rajasthan, India, and master from the University of Pennsylvania, USA. Mr. Chitrakar, we welcome to the stage. I would also like to introduce the panelists. First, we have Mr. Alexander Sachwav, Managing Director, Andres Vena. Then we have Mr. Pradeep Shrestha, Vice President of Butwal Power Company. We have Mr. Bhanu Pokhrel, President of Nepal Hydropower Association. Mr. Sushil Pokhrel, CEO of Sumit Energy. I would like to request all of you to come on stage. Please be seated.
The third panelist, Vandana Gomber.
Okay, now I would like to give. Okay, I would like to tell Mr. Bhanu Pokhrel to.
So very good. So good morning to everybody. I think everybody appreciates the fact that this country needs to accelerate the pace of hydropower development. And so what we're going to do in the next 40 minutes that is allocated to us is to basically discuss three aspects. So I think let's stick to the topic. The first one is just to get everybody and the energy in the room up. What are some recent developments that give us hope? There are things that are happening for the better, things that we see which can actually help accelerate. So let's start with the positive. Then secondly, we can focus on what are some hurdles that you yourself as developers, as promoters, those issues that you're facing. And then maybe we can conclude by saying what sort of would be the next steps moving ahead. So I think we can just start. And so without wasting any time, so maybe Pratikji, can I ask you to be the first one to intervene?
Thank you, Anilji. To start on the positives, I think, let me recall the investment forum we had. I think that was in 2016 when the EDC conducted that with the Investment Board Nepal. And I remember that there was a lot of points that was put up from the Minister of Energy with regard to the reforms, administrative, and to attract the FDIs for among them, I think there's been notable progresses. For example, I think one of the constraints for FDI has been the dollar PPA. On that, I think there was a lot of discussion and there was a lot of delays because the government was holding the foreign currency PPAs based on the, well, kind of sour experiences the government had with maybe Khimti and Botikoshi, which they have been mentioning all the time. So that there was a kind of gap and there was a lot of discussions going on all the time. But finally, I think I must say on a very positive note that government came up with a foreign currency PPA, but with certain definitely conditions, terms and conditions. That is natural, I think. So the way it's put now is for PPAs, for projects above 100 megawatt, only there's a provision for foreign currency PPA. And that too only up to 80% of for the debt and for loan repayment of up to 10 years. So at least there's some opening, which is a very positive. So I think it definitely attracts the foreign investors. But then there's also some restriction, which I think government it's natural from the government point of view to have some restriction on the foreign currency investment. So I think on the PPA side, I think there's a very positive note. The second thing was there's always a hassle when you're going for a PPA, negotiation, because there was initially only up to 25 megawatt. There was a flat rate, and I must say that they have increased now up to 100 megawatts. So they have a kind of flat rate up to 100 megawatt, and now they have said even above 100 megawatt, they would use the same rate as 480 and 840, which is used for the seasons. Even for foreign currency, they have said, okay, we'll use the same PPA rate for FDIs, but at the time of signing a PPA, they use the foreign exchange rate that will be pegged for the duration of the repayment. So I think that's also kind of a positive note. So which means it's kind of, it's not discouraging for projects below 100 megawatt, because I think the government sees that Nepali developers or financial institutions are coming up and they're able to develop projects up to 100 megawatt. Okay, sure. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Does it work? Yes. Yeah, I would like, as a as a foreigner in this country, maybe to give a bit an outside view how I see the positive development of this country. I'm now 40 years in hydro business, and from the very beginning, I have seen that Nepal has one of the leading hydropower resources in the world. It has the potential. It has started very early with the installments, and then nothing has happened. I have seen hundreds or thousands of studies financed by World Bank. So I think Nepal is the country who has been most analyzed of all the potentials, and nearly nothing has been built. What was the hindrance? What was the big hurdles? It was for sure certain political instability. It was for sure missing of consumption, but it was also a lot of hurdles for investments going in that. And if we look on the development of the last years, nearly everything has changed. There is a stable government. There are basic rules that are existing here. There is a movement on privatization, on fundings, on tariffs that are starting to move in a direction where it is feasible. It has to be a balance between what is affordable to the people and how is it still feasible for the projects. To find that balance is still a tough way to go, but it moves forward. And what are the effects? With all the risks, what we have seen in the presentation before, it starts to be evaluated. It starts to be flexible enough to say it's worthwhile to move forward. And that's one of the reasons why we as a company are also here and want to move forward with the whole sector. With still all the problems, we will come to it, that will go on.
Very good. Okay. So just quickly, I think, this is how we have to, use these learnings. So definitely on the PPP and also the dollar or the foreign exchange part, so we can see things are moving. So this is very important. The second thing you mentioned was, a lot of studies, but no action. And so the fact that they've been studied, if the studies were current, that would also give us an advantage, moving ahead, because ultimately studies do tend to, delay these projects. But also what you're also saying positively is that rules are in place. Basically privatization is something that people have started to accept. And so maybe there was a lot of resistance. Tariff, is moving in the right direction. But then also you're saying, the balance between affordability and, what the government or the local people want. I think that those kinds of conversations are all enabling. So on that, can I ask Sushilji, to just add to that? So what are some positive things that you've seen, that'll give us hope in moving forward?
Thank you so much. The first thing is that today's discussion that we are having itself is a positive indicator, number one. Number two, the thoughts that we are giving for 40,000 megawatts in 10 years with the EDC, it has. And out of that, more than 80% contain the hydroelectricity. So itself, that is another indicator. And the investors that today is in this hall, the investors from around the world, more than 24 countries, and the delegates, more than 55 people in this house, that is the third indicator for the today's success. Not only this, but the government facilities, political stability, and the new policy and the one-door policy by the government, which is going to implement and is already structured, that's the much more attractive things. As today, we are discussing, myself, we are holding the 100 megawatt plus portfolio as a private developers. And my chairman holding, the EDC chairman is running a 1,000 megawatt plus. If these are just the consideration for the indicates for the privatized firm and how they can move further. We couldn't even think for before 2 years or 3 years, 5 years back, we never thought that we could have like this. But today, Garanco is here and they are asking, and other investors, they are presenting themselves that we are dying to invest into Nepal. Because it's our platform and we have to showcase ourselves. That's what we are doing today. So that I don't think that there's not any sign for the negativity. I don't think there's no challenges at all. It's just the place where we have to mitigate all those kinds of risks into the opportunity. And you are taking 25% return on investment from Nepal. That's the major achievement for us.
Very good. Okay, so very obviously, things are moving. And so when you think of, 100 megawatt to 1,000 megawatt range, and the fact that people are lining up, to invest, so that itself is positive. But the fact that we're all here together to discuss it is also positive. But what you're also saying, I think, is that challenges, no project or no profit-making project will come without any challenges. And so the attitude, you're saying is that, there are problems and we will resolve those problems as we move along. And so there, I think what Alexander mentioned earlier about, the flexibility, I think is very clear. And so rigidity, if the system was very rigid, then it would be difficult. But the fact that it is flexible also gives us, hope. Pratik, anything to add to that? Any good things that have happened?
Yeah, I think there, as I said, I just mentioned PPA, but I think there's on the land ceiling, because earlier there was a ceiling of 75 rupees, and you cannot acquire for, projects, come on, I mean, hundreds of megawatts, you definitely would need, and then need a much, a larger area. And there was a lot of, problems with land acquisition if you hit the limit of 75 rupees, and we struggled a lot on that. And it was a very positive note, again, from the government side that they were able to take that away, so which, given the hydropower as a priority investment, given, so that was a very positive thing. Similarly, on other areas, I think government is coming up with, they mentioned a lot of reforms, like they want to have a generation company, transmission company, and Nepal Electricity Regulatory Commission, so which has been established now. I mean, at that time when we had the first international forum, these were discussed, and like Alexander was saying, there's a lot of positive movement within, say, a very short period. I think if we gear up on this line, I think there'll be a lot of movements. And as I say, for foreign FDIs, the major attraction is first the PPA. That is the governing, come on, I mean, revenue stream governs everything. And unless and until you don't have a good PPA sign, nobody is going to invest. And then it comes the other, there are hurdles, definitely. Hydropower is a very complex thing. It's not just one item. But when the FDI investor comes, that's what they start with. And then there's other issues like environment, social, local expectation. How do you meet them? There's so many, but we need to look at from the entry point, that's it.
Yeah. So very good. So I think, the point about, so for example, somebody, sitting in an office, with the right intentions, puts up a ceiling, say, for example, for 75 rupees of land. So for those who don't understand rupees, it's a plot of land that is basically 72 feet, by 72 feet. And so when you put a ceiling of 75 rupees on a hydropower project, so that's a huge, burden and an obstacle. But what you're saying is that through a conversation, through a dialogue, those ceilings can be removed and it can be adjusted, to suit the basic requirements of every project. Alexander, just want to go a little deeper. You also mentioned the issue of affordability and consumption. And so just like the PPA is one enabling idea. So I think if the demand side begins to basically grow, then there's actually nothing a politician can do except to bow down to that consumption. But then you also mentioned affordability because Nepalese do pay a very high tariff for the electricity. So any thoughts on why you think those fronts or those issues might actually be the driving force to create an enabling environment?
If we look on the development of a country, whatever in the development is, the first concern has always to be to secure food and drinking water for the people. Mm-hmm. In the moment you have secured that, then the development is starting to move forward. The country a 500, 600, 700 megawatt project, and then private financiers are jumping on it. So there has also to be a government commitment to support larger projects. And the country needs it. So it cannot be served, the demand, just by 1, 2, 3 megawatt projects. They are necessary. They are keeping the rural areas going, the electrification of the country, but for the bigger ones, a government commitment, a government support, more than the framework will be necessary.
Very good. I think, you've highlighted some very, critical points here. The first one being, a country like Nepal, sometimes we always refer to it as a small country, but, compared to Austria or any country, it's not a small country at all. And so 30 million people is a huge, demand. But the second thing you also mentioned is that, a lot of things have to go hand in hand. And so you cannot do the tariff one day and then something else the other day, because all these things have to move simultaneously. And so as the people begin to consume more, their incomes go up, all that, has to be taken into consideration as we adjust the tariff, moving ahead. But also something you mentioned is the role of the government. I think, very often, the simplistic mind will say now that we have the private sector, the government can actually step out and step back. And I think this is something that a lot of people, have to realize, that the private sector can flourish only with, the government and with, the marketplace, fully functional. So I think, these are key, issues that you've, highlighted. Back to Sushilji again. So just in terms of, concrete, can you give us an example of, the optimism is there. I mean, there's no doubt about, the optimism, because you see a lot of people, it's interesting in Kathmandu, sometimes you see an IPO ad, for a hydropower, and then you see long queues of people, standing outside. And so with that optimism also must come realism, right? So, the private sector that is going to put money into hydropower surely must have a checklist, of things that they look for, before they put their money into hydropower. Can you name some of those things that, any private person, including, those shareholders, who are lining up to buy shares, what do they, think of when they think of investment in hydropower?
In terms of investment, every investor, they look for the return on it, right? So if it is a small size or big size, it depends upon the capacity of the individual investors. So if you talk about the again, it is always related to the opportunity what we have. As we discussed before, if it is related to consumption and demand, then we have to forecast ourselves where is our demand is, and how are we selling our product or our electricity to other countries. As we discussed before, we have the distance. The demand is not. It is not necessary that it has to be within the Nepal. As we discussed yesterday, we had a great meeting with the Satluj chairman, and the project of Arun and Satluj is already on the pipeline, and it is under the construction. And the livelihood of the local people has been already changed, and it is in the realistic phase, which is 900 megawatt in Nepal. So if we just consider that local demand and domestic use, then it is the different aspects. But if we consider it in a bigger aspect, then it will be the different demand size. So as an investor, for me or myself, either it is a small 1 megawatt project or 100 megawatt project, I always look for the return on investment, how fast I'll get my return back. As I said, it's a long term. But in terms of Nepal, again, we have to look on it that, is it really a long-term investment? But because people are getting their money back within 5 to 8 years on an average. And if it is a debt basis, then on an average, it goes to 7 to 12 years. So depending upon project to project. If we compare it to some other projects, definitely it's a lucrative investment for today's date. We are not sure that it will be the same for future. We are still, the challenge is that we don't know what will happen, like in India as today. Just Kiran was presenting himself that they are not going to invest in any solar projects. The reason is the low tariff rate, and it may happen for Nepal, but till today, Nepal Electricity Authority is giving us the guarantee that they will have the standard VAT rate for that 30 years of period of time. So that is still, as an investor, for Nepal, it is safe place for the investment. And other local issues these are our responsibility. We cannot say that FDI's people and investors, they have to take care of that. As a local developer ourselves, we have to be responsible. How can we draw the attention of the international investor towards Nepal, and how can we create that environment so that they can feel less risk and better return on it?
Very good. So again, this is a really easy, panel to facilitate, as you can see, because the issues are very clear, right? So for example, what you're saying is the returns are there. I mean, there's no doubt about it. In fact, you're very optimistic in saying, if people are getting returns in 8 years or less, then, it's lucrative is the word you used. But the other thing you mentioned was if, and when, there was a time when NEA was the sole buyer. And so this always became an issue. And now, basically the demand side has expanded. But then what you're saying is if you look at the reason, and so sometimes, in Nepal, we don't want to say India and China because it looks too big. But if we start saying Tibet, UP, and Bihar, then suddenly, a lot of possibilities, begin to increase. Because I think in the globe, in the world, when you say India and China, it means something quite different. But when we say UP, Bihar, and Tibet, it can mean something quite different, for the mine. And so the demand in the neighborhood is also something that we need to be extremely positive about. And the fact that we do have power purchase agreements and the grids, that are now, starting to be in place, I think also is room for, optimism. So thank you very much. So let's move, now to see, in the years ahead or in the months ahead, surely we need to iron out, more issues. But I think the two issues that you've also mentioned, A, taking responsibility, being responsible for the issues as they come up and not saying, well, there's not much you can do, versus we will take responsibility and we'll move things ahead. So this is one aspect. But the second also is the system is fairly flexible. And so if the loans cannot be paid in 10 years, if, basically the PPA, doesn't meet the kind of demands that hydropower have, then I think it's a question of sitting at the table and flexibly negotiating. So assuming that there is flexibility and assuming that investors do take responsibility for these issues, so in the next 6 to 10 months, what are some, major issues, that we need to start ironing out, so that, the investments that we expect and the acceleration, that we expect, it can actually start happening. So what do you see, in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think that leads to definitely challenges in hydropower. I think, like usually saying, hydropower is lucrative. It does so in paper, definitely, but I don't think all IPPs agree on that. There are a lot of IPPs who have been really struggling, and I think there's been, most of them are right now in the development phase. They haven't come up to the operation. And one of the main challenge for the IPPs has been the power evacuation. Because you can dream about hydropower, you can plan in paper exactly in terms of financial lenders, you can even convince the lenders, okay, you get your returns by 8 to 10 years, and developers can, shareholders can expect also good returns, definitely on paper. But when it comes to practicality, there are a lot of issues. And it starts with, as I said, land acquisition, but that has been lifted up. Then there's a lot of social issues that we need to face as we go into the field. Local demands, local expectation. And there has been cases, and recently there was just a couple of weeks back, there was one project that was supposed to, after all the dry tests, wet testing, they were supposed to just turn the key and start generating revenues, and this was vandalized. So who's going to give the security? And the moment you have everyday delays, it's going to count down, on your financials. So there's a lot of these problems. And power evacuation has been one of the key challenges for any developer. We have, like BPC, we have been operating now a project in Lamjung Nyadi hydropower, and we are worried because the contractor is moving pretty fast on his obligations, but we don't see the power evacuation transmission line to be in place at that time. So we are pushing, if that doesn't happen, then the cost is on us, okay, there's an agreement in the PPA where, there's the penalty for us, but come on, that's not going to, again, able to, for us to meet the liability with the lenders. So definitely, power evacuation is one of the major challenges. Then, as I said, local expectation. And that's something very, so we need a governance, we need the government to make sure that all these developers in the hydropower sectors, they give some kind of security. I don't know in what form, it's so difficult because we have gone through political instability, and hoping now with all these states, provinces that are coming, so there needs to be all these regulations in place properly, because, if you're paying the royalty and if you have a river in the border between the two provinces, these needs to be streamlined very carefully from the very beginning so that we don't have problems. The other technical problem that I see is, earlier, if there was an export-oriented project, you could design at a lower flow exceedance than Q40, But then, if an upper project is developed at a higher discharge, but then at a lower one, you are regulated with the NEA PPA with Q40 exceedance, then you have a major problem again. And these are cascade projects. So I think we need to really streamline for the cascade project on the technical side as well. And there are several other technical risks, hydrology, sediment risk as well. So we need to come up. But I think I'll leave it at that.
No, very good. So you can see, this is a really good, panel. And so obviously, people with, their hands dirty, if you will, because, these are the real issues that we face. And so very quickly, like you said, the evacuation of the energy. So I think the grid is not moving as quickly as the generation. And so this is something that we want to keep our eyes on. But also you mentioned the rule of law. And so vandalism or security issues, where the presence of government, I think is something that, we really need to, focus on. But then also you mentioned about design issues. And so in a river, where many projects are being licensed or being designed, then what is the equitable, way, to basically license out, upstream or downstream, projects. So I think, these are, really good issues. And so, sometimes in management we say, if you can point at the problem with this kind of accuracy, then also the solution should be very clear. I mean, like you said, so many studies done in Nepal, and so, right here on this panel, the fact that we can say this is a problem, and this is a problem, should also mean that, somebody, can sit and say, well, here is the solution, and here is the solution. So it shouldn't be, too tough. Alexander, what do you see? So next time, let us say you came to Nepal in 6 months' time or a year's time, and nothing happened. So what are you worried about?
Yeah, what I just see, and maybe just supporting my colleague here in that thing, is if you want to develop a project, there are a lot of developers who are just jumping in from the first idea, making a rough basic design layout and making a cross-check for trying to get the PPA, some commitments, and move forward. In some of the cases, it could work. In most of the cases, the delays afterwards are tremendous. So if you want to attract private financing, if you want to attract something that is supporting you, you need a good project. And you need it accurate from the very beginning. You have to make it in details. You have to look on the design, on all the frameworks in the surrounding, and you need a sound preparation of all the applications. I have seen in the last years many projects all over the world where just the timing between finalizing the contract with all the details and financial closure for mini and compact hydro, for small hydropower plants, takes 1.5 years. 1.5 years missing when everything is fixed, just because the preparation was not done accurate enough. So you have to invest in this forefield, and you have to move forward then on a quick pace. And you have to be quite sure that you have your margins in that one. And I think that is something, if you make this accurate work beforehand, you can move quickly forward. So a delay in this respect is normally caused by that things. Yeah. For sure, I also think that with all the governmental regulations in place, it's also a necessity to have really now a careful look on that one and to see in reality, is it necessary to do here or there small adaptations? Fixed issues put to practicality normally need some amendments, not changes, but just amendments to the reality, and that is a government, a political task to do that in order to keep the flexibility of a moving forward business.
Very good. So, if we have the same Expo, Nepal Power Investment Summit for the next year, we are hoping for it is in China. But if it's in Nepal, maybe I'll be here, one of the panelists for the same discussion, and let's see what will happen. But I'm pretty confident we'll have a stable government, which we are looking for more than 10 years. And then at least by the rules, by the laws, it will last for 2 years, otherwise it goes for 5 years. So that is the major achievement, what will happen in next years, after 1 year. Number 2, the FDI, the indicators are already there in the Ministry of Industry and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Finance that FDI is coming up, and there are so many applications in the Investment Board of Nepal too. So we'll have a better data on that side. Beside that, the interesting fact is that, as I said, I totally respect my panelists, but before 10 years, if we had discussed for the same issues like 2 megawatts, 5 megawatts, 10 megawatts project, we used to say that we don't have manpower. We are not capable enough to handle all those things in terms of management aspects, in terms of technical aspects. Today, I'm proud to say that more than 86 megawatt projects is designed and done by Nepalese people. And even it is financed by the Nepalese banks. So it is doable. It can be done. But if we always just connected with the problems, then we don't have a solution. So for that reason, in the days to come, within the next year, we'll have a better technical manpowers. We're having the other technical issues. And like today also, we are having the EPCF training as well, so that people can join and develop their skill to have the better mindset and skill too. Beside that, the government is issuing billions of Nepalese rupees of bond for the power sector. That is another milestone in the history of Nepal to support the hydropower sector of Nepal. So that's also another achievement for us. And within a year, one-door policy of the government will take place, and it helps the international investors and foreign direct investors to come into the Nepal without hassles-free, and not saying that after 2 years, no, it is taking so much time, blah, blah, blah. No, we'll have a solution on that, and we'll definitely, on the behalf of Nepalese government, they will do it, because it's already in action and it is already in place. So I believe all those factors will draw the attention of the investors to the Nepalese market, and we have a bright futures, and you have a better return.
Yeah. Well, you can see this is quite a list of things, and just want to very quickly summarize. And so basically, I think what the panelists, and this is what is very clear, is that a lot of things are in place. Right? The regulations are in place. Like the ways to issue bonds are in place. The government, the elections are have just happened, and so all these things should basically indicate that moving into the future, there is a lot of hope. There's a lot of room, for optimism. But also, what I'm hearing is that, whatever needs to change, doesn't have to be a drastic change, but something incremental. And so what you're saying is, as long as we're able to be practical, and so as those practical issues come up, if we can all sit around the room and say, well, there's a small amendment here that needs to be done, or, the number of years, whatever the rate, so if those small changes can be made with practical knowledge, from the field, there's no real major, hurdle, moving ahead. So I think, with that, note, and I think it's a lot of issues, that we brought to the table. It's quite interesting that, I keep good time here. And can you imagine we've used only about 30 minutes of our panel, to get all these issues out. So what I'll do now is, I don't know if we can, have mics in the room, but are there issues that we can raise from the floor? And then, yeah, so it doesn't have to be a panelist who will answer, but we'll take it from the floor. So do we have mics on the floor? Yeah? Just be careful. No, take some. The mics are, sir? No, for us you'll be loud, but for the people in the back. Yeah. No, sir. Yeah, sir. Sir. It's coming. So maybe I can ask the panelists to have a drink of water before you. Sir? No, but
yeah, you can take this.
Take one here. So anybody would look. Let's be practical, as you said. So let's keep it short. If whether it's a comment or a question, just keep it short so we can cover as many, people as possible. Go ahead.
Quick question to Mr. Stresha. You mentioned about having a dollar index PPA, right, and which is getting foreign investors attracted to invest in power projects. I mean, I see personally, I mean, as an institution which promotes local currency, I see on a long-term basis that is not sustainable for any economy. That puts a tremendous drain on forex reserves. For infrastructure projects, revenues should always be, or mostly be, indexed to local currency. Because, when emerging market currencies by their nature will depreciate on long-term basis. Yes, it will be, your tariff will be linked to dollars, but that would mean, you put strain on your taxpayers, right, on a long-term basis. And that's just one aspect. Two, are you sure when all these projects come online, even 1,000 or 2,000 megawatts, will you have enough dollars in the market to convert that currency into convert Nepalese rupee into dollars, right? Convertibility risk is something which should be taken into account. And we are seeing that in countries like Nigeria and
very
elsewhere
good.
In Africa.
Very good. So don't compare us with Nigeria.
No,
but
I'm not.
But just the point is, you wish the central bank governor was here, and he's a very optimistic person, and I can already hear what he would say, to that question. So anybody wants to answer?
Thank you. By the way, my name is Pratik Pradhan. I think they wrongly announced it. I think you mentioned it correctly. I think because it all depends on what the government target is. Because I think government made a target of 10,000 megawatt in first 10 years, then 17,000 megawatt in 7 years. So when you are talking about these kind of targets, I'm trying to reflect that if the government really wants to meet those targets, I don't think without FDIs we will be able to do that. So on that note I was mentioning, but I fully agree to your point, what you said about the convertibility for dollar. I'm not an expert on that, but I think the government needs, like the finance ministry with the Ministry of Energy, they need to come up with the plan. To what extent, to what megawatt do we do for on a FDI basis? So those, I think I leave it to the more higher authorities in the government. It's not me to kind of exactly answer that, but I fully agree to your point about that. Thank you.
Shall we pass the mic? Yes, go ahead. Please.
One thing to add from my side, I think also it will be absolutely necessary with this plan to have a full working interconnection to all the surrounding countries to balance out the necessity there. And with such a step, you will have enough market, enough demands for all the time. So the interconnection and the working interconnection will be a necessity, not at the very beginning. So there you have the connection lines to India in this respect, but there has also to be a certain center of pooling of electricity.
Let's go to the next one. Please, go ahead.
Kiran Jetwa. So I was trying to get the panel's response on something, the concept of a solar park. Is there, especially if you are talking about mini hydro, right? Are there benefits of a solar park that can be captured and applied to mini hydro?
Mm-hmm. Very good.
In Turkey, they did something very similar for geothermal, where the government took the responsibility of identifying the wells, and then make it available as an auction to developers to come and develop. Solar park is the same way, where the government puts in the infrastructure, acquires the land, which is the most critical, right? And then they make it available to developers and say, hey, come and develop. At that point, all the risks are somewhat mitigated, so the tariffs can come down. Is that concept applicable to mini hydro?
Yes. So I think, given the fact that, water itself, the supply of water, it varies, in the course of the year. So I think there is a possibility. But Sushil, would you like to take that up?
It's the unique way of Nepalese model. It's not the Kiran, it's not the same model that other countries. But the beauty of this is that in Nepal, we have the dry and wet season. And if the dry season rate, the total energy yield is 30% within a 4 months of period, then we can convert it into the 6-month period, if 30% of the total energy yield in that size. It's not the compact or mini hydro, but in a bigger hydro size also. Suppose if it's a 10 megawatts project, and your energy yield not as the 30% of the total energy yield. If it is 30%, then you have the dry season of the 6-month period where you will get the better rate. So in that case, the short amount of the energy we can produce from the solar power, will be generated over there, and then you will get the better return on the investment. It is like an energy mix on our hydropower projects, so that you will have the better PPA rate and your return on investment will be better. I just look everything from the investors' perspectives. I'm thinking about how can we give the better return in terms of our investors who are backing us. That's all, and it is possible, and few of the projects in Nepal are already doing it. Yeah.
And then also, I think we have enough, sort of demonstration now of hybrid, projects. And so it's also interesting that, it's hydro, solar, and then with a diesel backup. And so the telecom companies, which have to offer service for 24 hours, even do that little diesel, backup at the end. So I think it worked out quite well. Alexander?
Yeah. I see two comments in this line. First thing is, for sure, hybrid solutions, mainly on off-grid possibilities, is something that could be quite important for Nepal. So combination of solar, maybe even wind with mini hydro, compact hydro, could be a much cheaper solution than to put a grid in every valley of the mountains. So that for sure is also something that needs some support from the government in all the structures, maybe in different issues. It's in this respect not a PPA, but maybe a start financing and whatever it is. If we go on the other hand to say how much of solar investment in a country could take place in the present time, you have always to be quite sure what could be the percentage of installed volatile energy in a grid. If you don't take care about that, you get such a lot of grid problems that you have to do a lot of additional investments. You need batteries, pump storage, shunt reactors, whatever. So it has to be balanced. With the installed capacity presently existing in Nepal, you have to be careful for a large investment in solar. In China, with having 1 terawatt installed nearly, it's easy to say we can massively go in solar. But in a moment you have something like 20% of volatile energy in the grid, you have heavy grid problems. So that has also to be balanced and taken into account in an energy policy.
Very good. So let's take it from this end.
So since this topic is about acceleration of hydropower, what the timeline we have in Nepal is.
But if you finish ahead, you can negotiate. But at the moment, in some PPAs, they let you have 50% as an incentive. But on the condition, as I said, both transmission line needs to be ready, and you are also ahead.
In Austria, do you have any incentives if you finish the project early?
Normally not really, because normally in the moment you have a free market, you can start trading earlier. So you get unplanned income out of that one. That's normally the incentive in the free market. So, and as I said, it's quite difficult. The question, what is really the responsibility, the full responsibility of the developer? What happens if he's earlier ready, as you have mentioned, and the transmission line from another supplier is not ready? He should still get an incentive for being earlier without electricity production, or he's then suing the transmission line. So it's not easy really to define positive incentives. It's also normally the negative incentives is just driven by the lenders. Right. So the penalties you have to pay.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, the point here is that, if, like you said, if the project was designed accurately, and so that's the word you use, then it's better to be accurate than to be too early. So I think, if you have an exam where people are overperforming, then maybe the exam wasn't, properly designed. Right? Yeah. So Sushil, anything on incentives?
I don't have anything on incentives, so that just I'll wrap up the first questions with the guarantor. I'd like to reply on that. Just in terms of the investors' perspectives, The issue was that about the US dollar and the PPA. Just I'd like to make you clear that it is not related to the US dollar for the whole period of the projects. It is related to the payback period or the investment that they have invested. Suppose it is maximum 10 years or more, 10 years or less, and the size should be more than 100 megawatt, right? So that we cannot expect all the Nepalese projects less than 100 megawatt will have the PPA in dollar. So there is a less chances of having the problems on the PPA and our capacity of the financial resources. And number two is that it is only the PPA, dollar PPA is only applied for during the payback period only. After that, no. Just to make it clear. That's
Very
all.
good. Alexander, any final words to this gathering?
Yeah, I think Nepal really has done a very good job and has laid a solid base for developing the future. And I think one of the most important steps is now to really start with some of the major works. And there will be a lot of driving in the moment the horsepowers are coming to the ground. And that will run automatically. We have heard today a very interesting story about the lab here and the development of turbines. We would be happy to work with them together. We would be happy as a company to invest here. But we need a real market here. It has started, but investments in manufacturing, in securing labor work needs labor. So the whole thing has started to fly, and I also agree with you, it cannot be only small hydropower. And you cannot manage 40,000 megawatts on small hydro. It has to be a combination, but it has to start, it has to move forward with the first 1,000, 2,000 megawatt, and then the whole thing will start to fly.
Very good. Pratik, any final word?
I think definitely there's a lot of positive developments going on, and I'm a positive person and I see a bright future definitely. But if we, as I said, if we are looking for large hydros, like 10,000, 20,000 megawatt in a short period, definitely we need to streamline a lot of bureaucratic hurdles. And among that, one of them is, we have this industrial investment promotion board. If you have a project that investment is more than 2 billion rupees, you have to go to investment in a promotion board to get it. And there you have, I think, 20 plus department heads when the board meets. And that's has been one of the difficulty, especially for when you're looking for projects of a large size. And you have to come up with a very friendly regulatory mechanism to kind of get these streamlined very early. So that's also one of the beginning ones. But later on, after the royalty mechanism, there are so many things, but I think the initial ones are the things that we really need to strike and streamline for especially if we are talking about large hydros and trying to bring the foreign direct investments. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so let's end this session on time. So basically, I think it's been a good session where we looked at some positive movements which give us room not only for hope, but actually the message is that people are investing, and so it's going to increase. So the acceleration is there. But secondly, you're saying the basic infrastructure in terms of regulations, rules, they're in place, but let's be practical, and so let's be flexible. So when issues do come up, let's make those small changes and then enable us to move ahead. And then also the final point is that you don't need to convene very large groups of people, and so the word inclusion sometimes in Nepal means you're starting to divide the pie into so many portions that you have too many people around the room. And so if we had really good leaders who can represent the sector and not forest and grasslands and water and watersheds, and so that's already 4 people, one window. And so I think if we can do those practical changes, then the momentum for what is already happening would actually pick up. And on that note, I hope the organizers have an incentive for the moderator who finishes on time. So thank you very much. It's really wonderful to have this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alin Chitrakar, Mr. Alexander Sochov, and Mr. Pratik and Mr. Sushil. Now, I want to call up on stage Mr. C. Yuki Suzaki, Senior Engineering, Tokyo Electric Power Company. And I want to request Mr. Nandalal. Okay, I want to, floor is yours.
Sanchai-cha. No. Ma Japan Bata Ain. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm very glad to be able to introduce my company, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company. I'd like to explain the company profile and the strategy for the hydropower business in the global market, including Nepal. TEPCO is the biggest power utility in Japan, established in 1951, providing electricity in the Tokyo metropolitan area and its surroundings. Our electricity sales of 250 billion kilowatt-hour in 2016 accounts for 29% of the nation's electricity consumption. And its sales of $50 billion US is ranked 8th in the world. Its power generation sources, total capacity of around 70 gigawatts, has been diversified, including thermal, nuclear, hydro, and renewables, considering stability and economic and environmental aspects. As for the global business, TEPCO has already provided more than 600 consulting services in about 70 countries and invested in total of 5 gigawatt power projects. These investments are only in thermal power projects so far, but now we decided to invest also in hydropower projects, especially in Asian countries, using our extensive experience in Japan. That's why we came here. As for the renewable energy, TEPCO owns and operates 163 hydropower plants, 3 solar, and 1 wind power plant in Japan. Total capacity of hydropower is 10 gigawatts, including reservoir type and pumped storage type. As I mentioned, we are now seeking for the new investment opportunities with a special focus on the overseas hydropower projects. Our target capacity is from 30 megawatt to 500 megawatt, including green and brown fields. And the main target area is Southeast and South Asian countries, especially Nepal. In Nepal, we would like to invest into the hydropower project with local partners. We've already met some Nepalese companies to discuss a future collaboration. In my impression, they are so reliable, so that I'm sure that we can build a strong relationship with them. And in my understanding, Nepal should develop the storage type of the hydropower plants to build to bridge the gap between supply and demand, especially in dry season. TEPCO has a lot of experience of storage type in Japan. So I believe that we can contribute strongly to the development of storage type in Nepal. And also, TEPCO can provide owner's engineering services for design, construction, and operation and maintenance for every type of hydropower project. So the photo of this slide is one of the TEPCO's dam for the pumped storage hydropower plants located in Matsumoto City, center part of Japan. Matsumoto City is one of the most beautiful mountainous area in Japan. And the sister city relation with Kathmandu were established in 1989. And then each citizens are interacting every year. In addition to our technical contribution to the project, TEPCO can bring high-quality construction companies and manufacturers from Japan. Furthermore, for the enhancement of profitability of the project, TEPCO will also take an initiative in arranging financial framework with a Japanese public financial institution, such as JICA and JBIC, who can offer good loan terms. Finally, I'd like to mention that TEPCO would like to contribute to further development of friendship between Nepal and Japan through the hydropower project. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we have come to the end of the first session. Hope you enjoyed. Now, let us proceed to the second technical session. The second session is on foreign direct investment in energy project. To chair this session, we have Mr. Nandalal Shrestha. Mr. Sharma is the chairperson of Satluj Jal Visit Nigam.
Very good morning to all the ladies and gentlemen present over here. I am NL Sharma, Chairman and Managing Director, SJVN, that is Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam Limited, Central Public Sector Undertaking of Government of India. Ladies and gentlemen, let me set the tone of this session by sharing a good news that Government of India, through its public sector undertaking SJVN, popularly known as Satluj here, is going to invest about $1.2 billion in terms of dollars, or 7,500 INR, or in terms of NPR, it is around 12,000 NPR crore rupees, in the construction of Arun 3 hydroelectric project in the Arun River. So this investment Government of India is going to make in Nepal in the coming over 5 years. When talking about the employment generation in Nepal over a period of 5 years, we are going to generate around 7 million man days employment in the country, in the Nepal. And if we talk about the skill upgradation of the people, of the youth here, we are going to impart or upgrade the skills of the local people of around 3,000 local youths, local persons in the hydro as well as the associated work of the hydroelectric project. I am really thankful, grateful to the organizing committee and members of the program to give me this opportunity to share my experience in the field of foreign direct investment and financing energy projects in Nepal. As we know that energy is basic requirement of any civilization, and per capita electricity consumption is directly related to the prosperity of a country or any region over the world. As far as my knowledge goes, as on date, the average energy per capita consumption of United States is over 12,000 units per annum per person, and that of Europe is over 5,000 units. In China, it is more than 4,300. If we talk of India, it is around 1,100 units, and if we talk about Nepal, it is around 134 units per capita per year. If we talk about the electricity requirement of Nepal, it is more than about 1,200 megawatt, whereas the installed capacity in Nepal is around 800 megawatt, whereas the potential which has been studied in the Nepal hydroelectric potential, that is around 4,400 megawatt. The landscape for implementing energy projects is rapidly changing. The need for power projects financing has never been greater, as we know that hydropower is a capital intensive sector and with long-term gestation period. However, in the long run, it is a low-cost source of power with low operational costs, though capital intensive, meaning thereby that a great deal of investment takes place upfront, that is in the beginning, before commissioning of the projects. Arranging funds for the hydropower projects has always been found to be a challenging task. Most lenders and investors don't have that long term of an outlook. So to optimize the financing, more and more innovative ways of financing are required to be explored, but you need to really understand the risk you are taking upfront and have capital that is sufficient to make it work. In India also, most of the big business houses have stayed away from this sector, the hydroelectric development in the country, mainly due to the issues related to the land acquisition, environmental and forest clearances, local and social issues. It is mainly government with the different arms which is working in the hydro power projects. Presently in India, about 92.5% of the installed capacity in hydro power generation is tapped or is developed by the government arms, that the public sector undertakings, whereas only about 7 to 8% hydropower has been developed by the private sector. We, the SJVN, have faced financial issues while executing our first project, that is 1,500 megawatt Nathwa Jhakadi hydroelectric project, which is the largest project in the country, is a run-of-the-river project over Satluj River, that is the part of Indus River basin in the northern India. It was relatively easy that we were able to demonstrate the capability and capacity to build huge hydroelectric projects and run them successfully. Now, obviously, such financing in energy sector will come with its own risks. Deferred investment in electricity infrastructure in Nepal has caused scheduled power cuts of around 12 to 14 hours per day during dry season. As this situation is expected to worsen in future, commercial and industrial entities increasingly operate costly diesel generators, the import of petroleum products has exceeded total export and thereby contribute significantly to Nepal's trade balance deficits. The World Bank estimates that the borrowing cost in Nepal can be as high as 16 to 18%, which makes financing projects in the country unappealing. A more efficient way of going about this would be to focus on public or government funding sources. On the other hand, for banks and financial institutions, it is also an investment opportunity of estimated 24.6 billion US dollar to reach an installed capacity of 12,000 megawatt in hydropower generation and other renewable energy sources in Nepal. As on date, arranging funds for hydropower projects in Nepal is seen as a big challenge, and for this, Nepal needs foreign direct investment in the development of its vast potential, vast capacity, untapped so far in its rivers, flowing water through its rivers. The major hurdles which have been seen in the development of hydropower generation, hydroelectric potential, tapping of hydroelectric potential in Nepal, these are few hurdles. One is the political scenario. The political situation in Nepal in the past has not been very stable. The country has seen its own share of strife and unrest. With political instability, there was lack of coherence and strategic planning in legislation and governance. It is only in 2015 that Nepal adopted a new federal constitution. It is country's transition from unity to federal government system. Nepalese government on development of core infrastructure projects must try to maintain a stable politico-economic outlook for coming years in the interest of its growth. The constitution mandates substantial responsibility on local governments and provinces for healthcare, education, and basic infrastructure. Each state must identify its revenue generating sectors and encourage business houses, banks, financial institutions to make investment in such sectors along with formulating legislation which is less cumbersome. In addition, there must be tax incentives for the development of the hydropower sector. The other hurdle which has been seen in the development of hydropower sector is the policies regarding land acquisition. The government should encourage the developers to acquire land through its rules and regulations, but alternatively, the mechanism for private negotiation with the facilitation of the local government should also be there so that the land required for the development of hydroelectric power projects is available to the developers. The other hurdle is the forest and environmental clearances. The time limit for approval of EIA and IEE study must be reduced since it delays the timely completion of the projects, which directly affects the stake of the investors, cost of the project, and revenue to the government in the form of taxes and other administrative costs. The transmission network. In the earlier session, people were talking about the evacuation plan for the evacuation of the power in the country. So before the projects are commissioned, we need to erect the evacuation system, make in place the evacuation system, erect the transmission lines. So we need to work on it expeditiously as early as we can. Then the legal and regulatory framework. The framework, conditions, and incentives for private investments in power projects are not adequate, and a non-cost covering tariff systems discourages efficient electricity use. During 8th 5-year plan of Nepal, that is 93 to 97, of Hydro Development Policy 92, Water Resources Act 1992, Electricity Act 1992, Foreign Investment and One Window Policy 1992 were formulated to attract foreign as well as domestic investment from private sectors, but practically so many anomalies are still there in these regulations. So we need to correct all these anomalies and attract the investors and lenders to invest their funds in Nepal. Government may consider establishing an independent power sector regulator that will oversee the demand and supply sides of the electricity generation. Key role required to be played by the regulator that would be determination of tariff for energy generation. Tariff needs to set at level that offers a reasonable return on investment to the investors and also covers reasonable operational costs. Period of operation of project in the hands of the developers needs to be reviewed and increased to attract the developers or the investments in the hydro sector. Then the banking system and the financial institutions that are there in Nepal, their financial institutions need to enhance and upgrade their know-how for the project evaluation and monitoring. We are already working with local banks, their financial institutions in this regard, and making them partner in financing our Arun 3 hydroelectric project in Nepal. We can hold numerous debates and discussions and seminars, but it comes down to us and government to come up with the solution, a solution that will affect the lives of the millions, a solution that will affect the fate of the country, a solution that will affect how future generation viewers think of a situation in this country if most of our electricity come from hydropower projects. Once initial capital investment is made, no fuel price escalation, no fuel price shocks, no foreign control through oil imports, no worries about the climate change, just clean, just abundant, affordable electricity. It is easy to give a speech or deliver sermons, but here the flaws which lies in the system, it is even easier to suggest methods to counteract these flaws. But the hardest part is implementing these solutions in the reality. Many of you must be executives, engineers, or officers, and must know that it is easy way to give orders from the chairs from this capital. But when you go out in the field, you realize that the projects we finance today will affect lives for the millions of this country in the coming years. As we go through the years, we cannot regard access to electricity as a luxury. It is a fundamental right in today's world, and energy is what will enable us to scale new heights. Energy is the pivot on which today's society developed, and it will continue to be an integral part of the human growth. Access to energy is important, and we usher into an era of sustainable development. So today, I leave you with these two sayings, that there is no plan B because we have no planet B. And the other is, let's try in making the water work, developing the hydropower. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nandalal Sharma. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have another panel discussion which is on FDI in Nepal's power sector. This panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Rajan Karel. Mr. Karel is the director of Karel Group. I would also like to introduce our panelists today. First, we have Mr. Apar Neupani, Vice President Finance at Unicap, Ms. Nyuki Nishimura, representative of JICA, Mr. Gorak Rana, Head of Commercial and Global Banking, Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Joseph Hoyes, Director, Dragon Capital. Now, I would like to request all of you to be on stage.
Hello. Yeah. Very good afternoon, everyone here. We've been given 15 minutes, but again, we'll try our best to finish this on time, or even if not earlier. My name is Rajan Kandel. I'm the director of the Kandel Group of companies based in the UK. I am non-resident Nepali living in the UK. I'm very pleased to be here to participate in this program today. And I have a special guest here today, Mr. Apar Nirpane, Mr. Naoki Nisumura,
Namaste.
Mr. Gokona Rana, and Mr. Joseph Hoyes. Okay, well, thank you all for coming here this morning, this afternoon. And I see, looking at your profile, you have a very impressive profile. You have loads of experience in financing projects in the energy sector, especially the FDI. So I would like to start this session briefly, if you could give us, all the audience, your sort of involvement with the FDI, and especially if you have done in Nepal before, if you could briefly sort of give your background on your involvement in FDI, then I will take forward with other questions. So if you could start, sir.
Thank you, Rajanji. Am I audible? Okay. Personally, I have been working in different companies since 2005, and mainly those companies are involved in FDI. So from 2005, I was with Botekoshi Power Company, which was developed by Panda Energy from US. After that, I left that company and I joined Statkraft, and that was also the developer of Khimti hydropower project in Nepal. That was the first FDI project in Nepal. And after that, since 2016, I'm involved with another company called Infraco Asia, which is developing a 38 megawatt hydropower project, Kabelia hydropower project with its local partner, Football Power Company Limited. Thank you.
Okay, I'm representative of JICA, and JICA is a Japanese governmental organization. And you may be aware, but we're mostly involved in generation sector. In the past, we financed, we provided the concessional loan for Kulikani 1, Kulikani 2, and Kaligandaki A. Now we're financing Tanaf hydropower project that is 140 megawatts storage type. So our strong point is the concessionality of the loan. So our loan terms and condition is that interest rate of 0.01% and repayment period is 40 years with 10 years grace period. So basically, we're the development partners. That is why always the borrower is the government of Nepal. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, a little bit about Dragon Capital. We're the largest foreign asset manager in Vietnam. We manage a little bit over $2 billion in assets. Basically, we have a specialization in private equity within the clean development, renewable energy side of the equation. Most of our investments up till now have been in the greater Mekong subregion. So we have hydropower in Laos. We have basically hydropower in Vietnam. We have solar in Thailand. And we're looking at basically solar, which goes over water treatment plants. And the company we've invested in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and waste to energy in Siem Reap, where we have a waste management company investment.
Hi, good morning, namaste. I'm here representing Standard Chartered Bank. The group, as a group, Standard Chartered has presence over 86 odd countries. And we are open for business, we are hungry for business. Apart from that, I'll come down to the crux points later as the discussion progresses.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring one context here. The first hydropower project in Nepal was in 1911. That was with the British Crown at that time. And I was told one very interesting story at that time. When then Prime Minister, Mr. Chandra Samcher Rana at that time, when the hydropower was ready, when they connected the actual power and the first, at that time people were very sort of scared about the connecting electricity at home. People, they thought they might die because electricity over the time might kill the people. Even the light could be dangerous. And I think before the government actually put into the official places, or before they actually brought electricity in the palace, they tested in some of the civil houses, few houses, and they tested for a few months. Nobody died, and eventually then the power was connected to the palace. That was the story I was told. Very interesting. So again, from my experience, that we have in the UK, especially with the help of British Embassy, Nepalese Embassy in London, we have been doing various awareness program in the UK, especially the city, where there are a lot of investment, there are a lot of money there, and people are willing to invest in hydropower sector. And today I heard from various speakers here, they're very willing to invest in Nepal. They're ready to invest in Nepal. But again, why is it not happening? I can see there's a huge opportunity in Nepal. People are with the money, ready to invest. But again, why is it very slow? Why is it not happening? From your experience, sir.
Thank you. What I think is to develop a hydropower project, there are different stakeholders, and different stakeholders have different interests. Like government has different interests, off-taker has different interests, equity investor has different interests, supplier has different interests, consumer has different interests, similarly contractor has different interests. If the interest of all these different stakeholders can be synchronized, then a hydropower project can be developed. So the bottleneck, what I have seen is, there is some mismatch between the interest of these stakeholders. This is first. And the second, for the development of large infrastructure, large hydropower projects, definitely the market is the main bottleneck. Since Nepal cannot consume the electricity generated by the large hydropower project, and we are not, or we have not overcome the bottleneck of cross-border power market yet. So once the cross-border power market will be open, then there will be a third of large hydropower project development in Nepal.
Thank you. On the same topic, from Nepalese perspective, if I could put this question to Gorak sir. So why is it not happening? What are the challenges that you see in Nepal for to attract FDI in this sector?
I think one of the key areas that is working to be an impediment, just to draw from my recent discussions that are ongoing with some of the Chinese investors who are talking to us. One is management of the FX risk. essentially hedging for USD against NPR. The peg risk there is not something that can be addressed easily. That seems to be a major constraint right now. In addition to that, I think it was mentioned in one of the earlier sessions. One is kind of addressing this issue of country risk rating and also structuring of the facilities. The developers here are wanting a project finance mode, but they're still, I don't think they're totally inclined to fall into that module and that model of working as well. So there needs to be a lot of education. We've offered in the past to work with both EDC as well as the other organization. So I think there needs to be better communication, between the relevant stakeholders as to how to address the risk perceptions of either side, and more so for USD hedging. I think there are some positive developments that I've been reading in the papers. We've also offered central banks some help as to how to kickstart this hedging mechanism or creation of this market through which we need relevant help from the government stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello? Okay. I just want to make a comment on that. Stability and structure, I think that's the key, why it hasn't happened in Nepal yet. And we've been coming into Nepal since 2006, before the peace accord. And every year that we've come in, we've had to deal with different people who are basically in charge, different ministers, different people at the NEA. It's been very hard to get any traction, and policies have changed over on a yearly basis here in Nepal. So now that we've reached really what we hope is political stability, we're very, very positive on Nepal because we've already seen some very major changes happen in the power industry with the creation of the NERC, with the standardization of PPAs. So this is from the stable side. Hopefully we're now at a stable point where the new government that comes into power next month will be here actually for 5 years. Even if they were here for 3 years, that'd be pretty good compared to the past, to be honest. The other thing is structure, though. I mean, as a foreign investor, basically we're IRR focused. We're looking at the internal rate of return of projects, and that's an equation of time and return. And if we have to wait 5 years in pre-development of a project and we have to start investing during that 5 years, our IRR is shot. Now the hydropower projects today, the PPAs have been set up so that investors get a 17% return. That's the type of return that's probably justified for performing a project in Nepal. If we have to develop infrastructure, we don't have any evacuation or ready for us, things like that, then the IRR is just shot out the window.
Thank you. Thank you. If you could tell us your experience, did you face any challenge in Nepal?
So in this country, basically, always the challenge is in implementation. And for example, if NEA conclude a contract under the EPC, still it is totally unclear for me, but for example, force majeure is applied without any kind of the good justification, and the extension of time is allowed, and project delay without paying the liquidated damage by the contractors. And always contractors are in the strong point, and then employer cannot enforce them to complete that project in time. So governmental project, that's fine because the interest rate is concessional. But if the terms is in commercial, like 10% of interest rate, then 2-year delay of the project will just fails the project. So this portion is the biggest challenge I feel, like for Melamuchi water supply project as well, or any other hydropower project.
Thank you for those responses. The other important aspect I can see in Nepal, there's a lot of Nepalese investors, Nepalese companies are doing quite a lot in very small projects. But there hasn't been, or there has been some sort of difficulties, or we haven't been able to see private sector been able to do a bigger project in a joint venture way. I think that has got huge opportunities. What would you suggest that so that private sector in Nepal can basically be able to do a joint venture with big investors like yourself here? So if I could ask Apar sir's opinion on that, please.
Yeah, in my opinion, Nepali private sector is developing. Nepali private sector is enhancing its capacity in terms of execution of the project, in terms of operation of the project, as well as Nepalese financial sector, banking sector is also advancing. So their capacity has been significantly increased since last 5 years or so. But to enter into a joint venture agreement with a foreign investor or big foreign investor, I think Nepali private sector needs to improve on corporate governance. So without improvement on the corporate governance, I think it will be difficult for foreign companies to have a good joint venture with local Nepali partner. Although there are few cases, Nepali private sector has joined hands with the foreign developer, but to have more such kind of joint venture, definitely Nepali private sector has to improve its governance systems, transparency, and mainly ESIA or EIA procedures, environment and social standards. I think they have to improve on that. Yeah.
Mr. Nishimura, do you work with private sector? Are you looking for private partner? If you are, then what would you be looking out for?
Yeah, the essential difficulty in the joint venture with the local partner is the finance, I believe. So if, for example, even though the local partner committed for the finance by the equity in the future, like during the construction period, but nobody can guarantee that the local partner can put the equity in the latter part of the implementation stage. Then usually in other countries, the local partner need to issue bank guarantee, the letter of credit for the equity portion. But then what happened in this country? The lender, international lenders, will not, accept the letter of credit by the, local bank whose the rating is less than A-. So, but in this country, the government's rating is less than B, and the Moody's or the others. So essentially, the sponsor, international sponsor, need to guarantee the finance portion of the local partner. So that is the big hurdle. So for compensate that portion, the local partner need to show their value, like the negotiation with the local people or technical perspective as well. So this is kind of the essential problem, so that I or like JICA cannot do anything on that, but this will be a big hurdle for the joint venture between local partner and the international sponsor. Yeah.
Mr. Hoist, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, most of the major hydro projects performed in Nepal have been performed by the NEA, not the private sector in a sense. Although people, of course, transit from NEA engineers to other places. Second of all, there really is a lack of an EPC culture here, which is so important on major hydropower projects to receive financing. Then there is a lack of local access to financing in Nepal rupee, which my colleague just spoke of. Now the indexation of the PPA for projects over 100 megawatts, it makes it easier for foreign investors to come in and to hedge their debt. We're not looking to hedge our equity, right? We're looking to hedge our debt. Why? Because that brings security to the overall structure of what we're investing in. It's a majority of the capital structure of the project. So we're really just looking to hedge our debt for the 10-year period, not really trying to get an equity return out of it, right? So I think one of the factors has been solved. Some of the factors yet need to be solved. Implementation of the EPC culture would be very helpful to reassure financiers and equity holders alike that projects will be performed in a manner which is very professional, and if not, then there will be performance damages and penalties.
Thank you. On the similar topic, if Mr. Rana has any experience, and if I could add also ask a bank-related questions, if I could add on that, which is Standard Chartered Bank is considered to be a very conservative bank in terms of financing, and a lot of investors have kind of said it's not worth going to Standard Chartered Bank. They're very conservative. They don't take risks at all. So if you could also clarify us on that matter as well, please, sir.
No, we are largely aware of certain charges made against us. But see, there's no point trying to reinvent the wheel, the way I look at it. There's a structured way of approaching these kind of projects because the amount involved are huge. The risks need to be well appreciated. The due diligence that is there will have to be appreciated. And that's where we've, in the past, if I could share with the forum over here, had some differences with some of the developers, okay? We are a signatory to the Equator Principle. So there's a certain degree of, EIA will not cut it for us. So there's even for IFC and ADB funded projects, these are some of the checklists that they go through. It's a very structured approach of doing things. As Mr. Joseph here mentioned, EPC culture. Okay, that is something we insist on for projects that we would like to finance. Now, over here, people like to generally separate the E from the P to the C. Okay, so there is a way of approaching and addressing the issues. Some of the larger developers whom we are in conversation with, they appreciate our concerns. So I think if, like I mentioned, if there's a better communication between the developers and the financiers, then we can, get projects executed in Nepal.
Thank you. I will be coming to audience later on if you have any further questions from your side. Before that, if I could also ask you, especially Mr. Nopane and Mr. Rana from, and then if you have any suggestion for foreign investors, if they want to come and do a project in Nepal, what would be your suggestion from your experience on the ground? What would you tell to foreign investors? Because we have seen some examples in the past where the foreign investors they became frustrated with the situation. So if there's any suggestion that you would like to give to the foreign investors.
Okay, thank you. Basically, foreign investor, mainly they come from, let's say, Europe or some developed world. They realize that massive gap between the reality of that world and the Nepal. So mainly when they come here and they do a risk assessment of their investment in Nepal, then they find everything as a risk. So if they prepare the risk register, the register may go up to 200 plus. So everything they perceive here is as a risk. And then the risk mitigation process starts. So after risk mitigation process, they mitigate, let's say, out of 200 risks, they mitigate 100 risks, and 100 are balanced risks. But in terms of return expectation or return requirement, they do not discount the mitigated risks. That is one challenge that I have realized. And to develop a hydropower project, of course, hydropower project takes time. So foreign developers need a lot of patience. Since it is capital intensive project, it takes a long gestation period. So foreign investors need patience, and they need a good local partner here. They need a good local partner, and of course the bureaucracy in Nepal is not very easy to work. So they need patience, they need a local partner, and they need to understand the reality, and whatever document, whatever paper they prepare, those need to be very standard. If they follow those process, then I think they will have more easier time in future.
Goraksai, would you like to add anything on that?
The way I look at it, see, at the end of the day, both the developer, the financiers, all of us are potentially, together in the project, So, I mean, it's not like one trying to outdo the other. It's a partnership that needs to be forged, and we need to work together primarily to address or mitigate most of the risks in a project, and it's a partnership. That's something that needs to be, I think, more articulated maybe, rather than us versus them kind of an attitude, but it's more a partnership for the project to get it done.
Thank you. My next question goes to Mr. Hoises. If you could, basically you here in Nepal saying you got money to invest into projects. So so literally this is for the audience here as well. We got investors, we got people with the funds who are keen to invest. So what would you be looking for in terms, I think you briefly touched on this before, but if you could just maybe put it in a bullet points that what do you need so that you can start investing actual money in Nepal? What do you need on your list?
Well, I have to say that when we've come to the last 10 years looking in Nepal, in and out of Nepal, we really concentrated on smaller run-of-river projects, and really structure dictates how we consider investments. Now I'd have to say, with the changes which happened last year, standardization of the PPAs, encouraging base power generation through higher tariffs, indexation of the PPA, that we would probably be looking at larger projects of 100 megawatts or more. So our mind point changes because there's more structure about what we need. We need more secure investment. So, I've always talked about stability and structure, and I think, before tax incentives, anything else like that for a foreign investor, we have to look at what's going to give us the safest return, what's going to maximize our return. So basically, like I said, we can't afford to be that patient, to be honest. We have to have a project as a private equity investor where the pre-development is pretty much facilitated. And it's along the concept of the Super 6 and the National Pride projects in the sense that they were really supposed to be shovel-ready. Now, that didn't happen because of various interruptions, et cetera, the instability. But at the same time, we're really looking to come into Nepal, look at the safest structure that offers a decent return. It doesn't have to be the highest return, but we're basically formulating a risk-return scenario as private equity investors. So I would say, evacuation is a big issue here in Nepal, right? The existing grid needs to be fortified. It needs to be expanded. I think His Excellency yesterday from the head of the NEA said that there were 6,000 megawatts of FDI projects which are under consideration at the NEA. And that may be true, but I kind of question how much evacuation is actually ready for those 6,000 megawatts of projects. But access, licenses, permits, EIA, all that goes around to preparing evacuation, all that goes around to preparing to construct a project has to be in place so that you can then invest and you can construct and you can actually achieve that 17% return. If we have to wait five years to do something, I'm sorry, but there are other countries which are more competitive. That's just the plain truth. And our money has to go to those countries where we can actually realize a return.
Thank you. I would also like to request all the audiences, if you have any questions, please keep that ready. I'll be coming to you in a minute. So before that, I would like to ask Mr. Nishimura again, are you willing to work with private sector in Nepal? So if you are, then what do you need on a list so that you're ready to work?
So yeah, basically, in this country, as he said that the condition is totally not favorable comparing to Myanmar or Lao Republic or Thailand. So then all the finance investors feel that the risk and return are not balanced. So they are fine if high risk, high return or low risk, low return. Both are fine. But high risk, low return is not acceptable, of course. So according to many investors that I discussed are saying like that. So it is not a matter of one item, but so they are looking at the market or condition as a whole. So I cannot tell you this point is important though. Sorry.
Can I just make a follow-up point? I shouldn't only tell about issues, problems. I mean, there are potential solutions, right? I mean, Nepal has a great resource. There's no doubt about it. The NEA has assets. They have generation assets. The NEA needs to grow out the grid. They have a plan to do so. It should be supported because it's a very aggressive plan. But, in this day and age, the question is, we see elsewhere throughout the region that national power companies do not need to own generation. They need to basically make sure that the grid basically grows so they can wheel more power through the grid and make more money from a volume perspective. And they have to make sure that there's a proper margin between the retail tariff rates and the offtake rates so that they can be sustainable as well. So it's just the NEA's profit is based on how much power they wheel through the grid and that margin between rates. But there are assets that the NEA has that when combined with support from the likes of ADB, World Bank, other international agencies who will help to grow up, expand the grid, that it's not something that happens overnight, but it's something which basically can be used and contributed by privatizing the generation assets over time. It doesn't have to be all at once. Taking that money, reinvesting it in the grid together with outside support, and that gets you, the infrastructure that you need, not only in terms of domestic generation, but also in terms of connectivity.
Thank you. I think there will be the time for lunch coming up very soon for everybody. I'm sure you are looking forward to your lunch. But again, if you have any burning questions from the audience, please, if somebody could help with the microphone there, please. Yeah. It's not working.
Hello, yes. I am Taranath Sabkota. I am Managing Director of High Himalaya Hydro Construction Private Limited, and I am civil engineer and chief of the construction company. Now, my question here is that we have been discussing about developing 40,000 megawatt in 10 years. So, however, we have developed less than 1,000 megawatt. That is the reality. And we have hearing discussion here among the panelists that what are the risks, what are the opportunities, and how are we going to develop the hydropower projects. Ground reality is that we have very social insecurity. We have a lot of problems, and when we build a hydropower project of very small capacity, let's say 3 megawatt, we go to the plant and we destroy that. Local people destroy the plants, and government is doing nothing. What does the government say? Negotiate with the people who are vandalizing the plant. We need the government, we need the security from the government side. Now we have the federal state, we have 7 provinces and 7 state government. My question here is that if we discuss on how to bring money and how to build a hydropower project, it will help obviously. But ground reality is that we have to improve our social security. We have to security of the hydropower plants. We are ignoring that. Therefore, what could be the suggestion from the panelists to develop our security situation? In fact, we don't have any security. Our life is not secure. People ask that if you develop this hydropower here, you cannot be safe like that. So we have to have the very good and safe environment. And
Okay.
we
I think we
we
got your
just
question.
need the solution from the panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Because of the time constraint, if there are any other questions, maybe I'll take other questions. So we'll deal with all in one go. I think that will save our time. Yeah. Gentleman here, please.
Yeah, I think basically maybe get a response from the panel on, there are companies out there that basically takes everything you need to generate power from hydro and put it into a 40-foot container. Okay, and then all you do is you drop ship the container to the wherever region where it needs to be, develop a penstock of water, basically the water that come into the 40-foot container, and then another that just goes out. That might address this gentleman's security issue. And your thoughts on that?
So I'll take all the questions. Yeah. If you just make a note. The gentleman at the back there with the white jumper, okay, or coat, yeah. If you could briefly tell your name and company, that would help us as well.
Yeah, I'm Suresh Regmi from Professional Computer System. Basically, my question is for Naoki Nishimura. He said that in joint venture, the local partner should be able to provide guarantee to the foreign investors. When it's a large project and it's a large amount of money involved, how can a local partner provide guarantee unless it is done by government? Thank you.
Any more questions? Shall we deal with these 3 questions then? Okay. So I will leave to you. Who would you like to take the question about security, local security? Would you like to take that question, sir? Yeah.
Yes, sure. Basically, this local security, or you can say the situation of law and order, that has been the problem in hydropower project. And local people or local politicians or local groups, they can demand anything they like. Even though those demands are not related to the project or not in the capacity of the project to resolve those demands, local people can demand. And we have seen that hydropower projects have got minimum or no support from the security forces or local administration in the project area or in the project district, and project has suffered significantly. And most of these kind of local demands are not only the local people's demand, they have a color of political flavor. So if one cadre of one political party has one demand, then the cadre of another political party has more strange demand. So they want to show them as more pro-public. That is the race between those political parties in local society. So it is very sad to say, so there is some kind of political affiliation for such a kind of illegal, or you can say unreasonable social or local demands. And until and unless these political parties and political leaders are clear that such kind of social demand or social obstruction or social vandalism are punished or must be punished, then hydropower project or even local administration is helpless. Even local administration punish them, then there will be a call from the minister or some political parties, please release them. So until and unless such kind of political support for such illegal activities continues, I think this problem will continue. And but we have a kind of hope in future, since we are passing through the political transition. So every 6 months or every 9 months government was changing, or even the prime minister was changed. There were 2 or 3 ministers in a term of a prime minister. So due to all these changes, this situation of law and order has been challenged. Now election has been completed, so we are expecting a new government soon, and at least I hope the new government will be a full term of 5 years. If that happens, we will definitely see better situation of law and order in project area.
Thank you. I think because of the time is running out as well, if especially from the foreign investor perspective, there's another questions. There's 2 more questions there.
Yeah, I think one more question was also directed to me from Mr. Regni, that foreign investors ask for some kind of guarantee from the local partner, and how can we give the guarantee? I think that depends on foreign investor. If there are some kind of private equity fund, they may want to exit, and in that case they wish to have some kind of exit guarantee from the local partner. But if there are some kind of institutional foreign investor, I think that is not the case. They do not ask for such kind of guarantee. So they will participate with a local partner as a equity investor. So in that case, such kind of guarantee are not required. I think so.
Okay, Mr. Hoyce and Mr. Nishamura, do you have anything to add? We're just running out of time.
So regarding the guarantee thing that I raised, for the investment in hydropower sector in this country, definitely the foreign investor or sponsor needs some help from the local sponsor as well. So joint venture is essential. This is the first. Then second, it is also essential problem that local partner cannot guarantee. It is not possible for them to guarantee the investment. On the other hand, the international sponsor need to get the debt finance from foreign investors, foreign banks, like IFC or JICA also have a private investment wing. And then it is the example that in the past we faced. And international sponsor finally end up with providing guarantee by themselves for the sake of the local partner. So this is only one example, but when we proceed the negotiation, then at the end of the negotiation, we come up with a new risk or cost that international sponsor need to bear. So then at the end, finally, the international investor understand the total cost of the project. Then after that, they need to evaluate if this project is financially viable or not. So this is just an example that the FDI can face some additional cost at the beginning they didn't recognize.
Okay, well, I think finally I would like to thank all the panel members. Thanks all the audience for being so patient and listening to us. I think this has been very informative session. I was given 50 minutes, but I finished in 45 minutes, I think, this session. I think there's a lunch after this. So thank you again for your attention. Thank you all for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, lunch is ready. We will have break for lunch. Lunch will be served in the Rose Garden. Please collect your coupon, and we will be back on 1:40. So 40 minutes for lunchtime. Thank you so much.